Byron Cathedral sits beneath a cold moon while corpses litter the ruined hall like a warning. An unseen voice mocks a lone human arrival. A mere human making it to this point? The scene holds the quiet before a boss confrontation as shadows crawl around the cathedral towers. Elector Steele steadies his breath in the devastated throne hall, while bodies and broken armor mark the path he fought to reach. A voice from the central dais concedes skill with the line, "I have to acknowledge that you're skilled." The hero advances toward the looming figure waiting in the crimson light. Demon Lord Farza reveals himself in a wash of red aura, horns curled and a massive weapon raised as the hall trembles. The system labels him plainly, Demon Lord ranked 7th, Wurzburg's Demon Lord Farza. Han Jaewoo accepts the threat with a hard smile and prepares for the clash. Han Jaewoo, known as Elector Steele, charges into the Demon Lord's chamber with sword and shield raised. He declares, "Shut it, your era will come to an end today." The fight erupts immediately, as blade meets monstrous defense. Elector Steele unleashes a named technique, Empirical Sword 12th form, sending red, gold sword trails spiraling through the hall. He dives on Farza with a deliberate sequence of strikes tied to his Empirical Sword style. The Demon Lord braces as the technique burns through the air. Jaewoo bellows that he is going for a finishing strike and lunges with full force. A blue system interface unexpectedly materializes before his eyes, interrupting the momentum of his assault. The sudden UI presence stalls his attack and changes the immediate battlefield context. A system notification appears bluntly. You have been disconnected from the server. Farza uses the pause to deride Jaewoo, calling him flawed and gloating as the connection severs. Jaewoo panics and begs for the interruption to stop while the boss's cruelty fills the silent gap. The screen floods with quest result banners as the session terminates in a white fade. The raid registers formally, Wurzburg's Demon Lord, ranked 7th, Farza raid, and the status declares Warrior Han Jaewoo failed to clear. The abrupt failure stamp severs the battle in the inn. Game consequences begin to register. Back in the real world, 2 debt collectors stand outside Han Jaewoo's apartment, complaining about his obsession. One asks, is Jaewoo still playing that game? And the other answers, yeah. How do I wake him up? They head inside, determined to get him out of the capsule. Inside the cramped room, the collectors worry over how to rouse Jaewoo from the capsule amid scattered trash. As one prepares to shake the player gently, the other fumbles with the cable and confesses, I accidentally unplugged it. A shadow of dread looms over the mistake. Han Jaewoo bursts out of the capsule and confronts the man holding the cable, grabbing him by the collar and demanding to know who unplugged the Ethernet. The collector stammers an apology, and the room erupts with shouts of alarm. Jaewoo's identity settles into the moment. His name is Han Jaewoo, and anger sharpens his control. Jaewoo pins the panicked collector to the floor without mercy while captions trace the life he once led. He used to be popular, known around Hanum as the problem solver, the brain, the money goblin who handled other people's troubles. The montage makes clear that the man in the capsule was someone who once commanded respect and favors. Images of a life filled with cash and status flicker across the page before Jaewoo turns his back on that world. He chose the game over shallow luxuries, and ended up owing debts instead of enjoying comforts. The contrast explains why the capsule became his refuge and his compulsion. Savior of Humanity unfolds as a cinematic VR world, where Jaewoo fights alongside rogues, mages, and fighters against monstrous threats. The captions state plainly that the game changed him and rewired his priorities. The virtual camaraderie and challenges reshaped what he wanted from life. A single-player open world spreads out before him, and Jaewoo dives into cinematic battles that felt more real than his former social currency. He practices mechanics, refines routes, and partners with allies to topple dragons and guardians. The game's scale made obsession inevitable for someone with his hunger to master systems. Magic pours through swordplay and shieldcraft in moves that look like choreography but function as hard mechanics. The world feels genuinely magical to Jaewoo, and that sense of wonder anchors his dedication to mastering every system and exploit. Jaewoo became attached to the game's diverse, compelling characters from horned nobles to stoic paladins. Their stories drew him in and turned missions into personal quests. He found meaning in their arcs, and a purpose in competing with and protecting notable in-game figures. The game rewired Jaewoo from a money-first operator to someone who borrowed heavily to secure entry into the virtual world. He signs IOUs and returns to his collectors smiling because the capsule purchase was the sacrifice that bought his obsession. The debt collectors celebrate, convinced repayment will come when he rises to the top. Jaewoo grins at the absurdity of it all, and admits his own crazed focus on the game. A collector scolds him for the poor treatment despite having financed his capsule, and Jaewoo meets the complaint with a calm, calculating smile. Nothing breaks his resolve to keep playing. Jaewoo retaliates by calling out the collectors, private hypocrisies, flashing their secrets like evidence. The tension explodes when one collector rails that Jaewoo borrowed $1 billion for a game and therefore has no moral high ground. The room tightens as the debt and shame collide. Confronted with the furious accusation, Jaewoo feigns confusion and the collector nervously retreats. Another voice sneers that a simple walkthrough won't erase $1 billion in debt. Jaewoo lets the scoff land and steels himself, already calculating how the game can change his fate. Back at his desk, Jaewoo turns raids into manuals, mapping boss patterns and routes into clean steps. He types a final line across the screen. Then you'll clear it. That's it for the dungeon walkthrough. The walkthrough becomes both his plan to survive the debt and the product he hopes will save him. Jaewoo scans his bank statement, watching withdrawals and frightening remaining balances add up. The collectors' voices echo in memory, pressuring him to return to their schemes. He lets the numbers settle, then turns his attention back to the one place he thinks he can win money, the game. Jaewoo refuses the collectors, offers with a single cold nope, and admits privately that he still hasn't seen the game's ending. The true ending, a finish no player has reached, becomes his obsession and the justification for everything. He chooses the capsule over compromise. Jaewoo promises himself that finding the true ending is repayment for what the game taught him as the virtual sun sets over the horizon. The collectors push and prod in the real world, telling him to go home and reminding him about interest. He walks away from their noise, focused only on the next run. Jaewoo slams the door behind the collectors, breath heavy, and approaches the capsule like a pilgrim returning to a shrine. He rests his hand on the glass and stares into his own reflection, committing once more to the world that has become his life. The door seals and the system prepares to boot. The system announces starting, and the title card for Savior of Humanity rolls as the simulation boots. Jaewoo spawns into Byron Cathedral, where civilians and nuns move through the plaza, pixels still glittering in the air. The familiar hub returns him to the place that rewired his life. Jaewoo's HUD labels him Elector Steel, Savior of Humanity, and a system pop-up reveals a strange side effect: death penalty suspended from actions for 22 hours due to the disconnect. Panic cuts across him as he shouts, "How am I supposed to earn money then?" Players and NPCs watch the unexpected rule change ripple through the server. Jaewoo barely registers the sudden shift, before a blur of data heralds someone arriving at speed. He blinks in surprise, and the form of a blue-haired girl coalesces with glittering fragments of her outfit. Her presence lands in the cathedral like an admin stepping through code. The new arrival lands gracefully before the altar, and Jaewoo stumbles backward, shocked and defensive. He demands identity, while the girl beams and introduces herself simply. "My name is Aquila." She then declares she is the game master of Savior of Humanity, an obvious admin presence in the cathedral. Jaewoo scoffs at Aquila's appearance and mockingly asks if a kid like her could be an admin. She retorts with a playful admonition not to judge by looks, and Jaewoo stays skeptical, challenging the sudden claim of godlike control. The exchange undercuts formality with sharp humor and intense curiosity. Aquila snaps and time warps under her command, as the cathedral and NPCs freeze mid-motion like statues. Jaewoo's shout dies in the still air, while the demonstration makes one fact undeniable: she manipulates the server state itself. Players and parishioners hang suspended in the pause. A robed priest whispers that what he sees looks like an SSS rank time, stopping spell as villagers gape. Aquila laughs off the assumption and clarifies bluntly, "It's not a skill. I just downed the server for a bit." The admission lands heavier than any magic, revealing administrative authority rather than game mechanics. Perched on a flower-laden lectern, Aquila asks if Jaewoo finally believes her control over the world. She unveils a 7th anniversary event with a system notification that a new world will open at noon. The event urges players to be the first to clear the game in a new world as a new character, setting a high-stakes challenge. Jaewoo admits under his breath that the game's true ending still eludes him when Aquila leans forward with an impossible incentive. She reveals the reward, 25 billion won, a number that turns his private obsession into a public lifeline. His eyes flare with new calculation as opportunity and desperation combine. Aquila tempts him further by suggesting that clues to the game's true ending might exist, and that she can provide leads. She manifests a glowing blue data block in her palms, implying an authorization or piece of essential information. The offer reframes the event as more than prize hunting. It promises possible knowledge. Jaewoo reaches for the data cache, but Aquila pauses him with a soft sales pitch. Try the event now and receive a free gift. A blue UI ping begins to fill the air like a contract being prepared. Temptation and the promise of reward push him closer to the doorway. A sudden system deposit appears. Aquila has sent 30 million won to Jaewoo's account, raising his balance and drawing gasps. A leaderboard updates with Jaewoo surprisingly topping the list among players. Aquila teases that he is her VIP, while Jaewoo reels at a windfall he never expected. Jaewoo stares at the translucent deposit confirmation in stunned disbelief, then lets relief and calculation settle in. He thinks that even if he fails the run, 30 million will cover this month's interest payment. The money buys a brief respite, and determination flickers back across his features. Jaewoo declares loudly that refusing would be idiotic and pledges to try the event, his voice cutting through cathedral hush. Aquila applauds, delighted and quick to praise him as the sort of top player who accepts a challenge. System confetti and celebratory effects crown the decision. Aquila announces that she will send Jaewoo into the new world immediately, and begins an incantation of administrative commands. A loading UI appears, and starlit data streams gather like a portal being built. The cathedral fills with the hum of an irreversible transfer sequence. Aquila rises like an avatar with wings and a halo as cosmic particles swirl around her, and she solemnly announces installation. Columns of blue light descend into the cathedral and plaza, provisioning portals and preparing the new world's thresholds. The entire hub becomes a deployment field. A torrent of blue data pours through space and coalesces on a single isolated door standing on a barren plain, like a doorway dropped onto a moon. Jaewoo and Aquila watch the flood of packets converge and lock the portal into place. The door becomes the literal gateway to the new world. Aquila points at the glowing threshold and explains that the door leads to the newly opened world. Jaewoo asks if walking through will begin the event, and Aquila confirms with a simple, "Yup." He steps forward toward the threshold with everything at stake. The door yawns open in a blast of white light, and Jaewoo grins with a confident point at Aquila, reminding her not to forget the promised reward. He steels himself and strides into the radiance, committing to the run that might change everything. The threshold swallows him in an instant. As Jaewoo crosses the threshold, Aquila calls after him with a careless smile and a final detail. She begins to warn, "If your character dies in this event." The trailing words hang in the bright doorway, as Jaewoo moves beyond any immediate ability to react. Aquila finishes the warning bluntly. Dying in the event means dying in real life too, and the tone in her voice strips the moment of levity. Jaewoo's eyes widen in stunned disbelief even as the transfer's bright energies clamp around him. A final burst of colorful data marks the completion of the teleport. Jaewoo hurtles through the void screaming as the new world's entry tosses him through sky and atmosphere. He free falls toward a dense forest, wind tearing at his armor, and the last stars of the transfer streaming past. The descent is brutal and alone, no guides or NPCs steadying him. The landing ends with a violent impact that punches a shallow crater into the forest floor and scatters leaves and dust. A deer bolts from the edge of the clearing, while Jaewoo lies winded on the ground, groaning from the pain of the fall. The remote silence of the woods presses in around him. Jaewoo forces himself up and pulls a translucent HUD into view with a grimace, astonished that the impact translated into real, painful feedback. He remembers Aquila's warning and wonders if she truly meant it, then forces a shout into the trees. "Aquila!" The pain confirms that the stakes are now not only virtual, but mortal. Jaewoo steels himself at the forest edge and commits to the run, shouting that he will do this. The world responds with a bright system banner naming former Elector Steel Savior of Humanity, and then the game officially starts. Jaewoo staggers through the trees, hunger and thirst making his legs shake and forcing him to lean on a crude staff. He curses Aquila under his breath and drags up the status window to check his condition, the force pressure confirming the transfer was no simulation. The status window reveals a pathetic starter build with only 20 max HP and 3 mana, and Jaewoo realizes he is already dehydrated after half a day of travel. The sight of a single water droplet on the forest floor gives him a desperate focus, wondering how this character could possibly reach a happy ending under such conditions. Jaewoo finds a clear river and collapses toward it, thankful that basic survival tips he once read still apply. He mutters that Aquila can keep her jokes while praising the game for realistic survival mechanics and rushes to drink. Drinking directly from the stream restores small ticks of HP and steadies him enough to lift his head. Jaewoo notices a woman bathing upstream, her long hair catching the light, and he freezes to avoid making noise and drawing attention. The system flags Jaewoo as excited and deducts a point of HP as the bathing figure turns, and he involuntarily spits water at the sight. He reels at the unexpected beauty and the mechanical consequence, realizing certain emotions have direct costs in this world. A sudden system prompt asks for paid content, provoking an absurd outburst from Jaewoo about VIP status and the supposed complete edition. An off-screen voice interrupts, addressing the pair and pulling them back into the scene. 5 witches close in like predators around a stunned novice, their hands and gazes holding him in place. Jaewoo can only manage a trembling sound as the lead informs him that payment is required to see what comes next, the threat clear in every casual touch. The witches shove Jaewoo to the floor and bind both him and a rugged monster hunter nearby, initiating their captivity. The room fills with whispered cruelty as their captors decide what to do with 2 unexpected prizes. The red-haired witch leans over Jaewoo and taunts him as his HP ticks down to a single point, the system confirming his rapid loss. She offers a cruel bargain to keep him quiet, making the danger painfully obvious to both prisoners. From above, the witches circle and laugh as 2 captives gather the courage to speak. The rugged hunter introduces himself as Rudd, and the younger man claims the name Valorstred Valor, each sizing the other up while wondering how fate tied them together. Rudd admits bad luck, explaining that pursuing prey led him close to the witch's lair and into a trap. Jaewoo shrugs off the coincidence, confirming that he simply landed in this world and had no safer path than the one that caught him. Rudd notes how young Jaewoo looks, while the younger man insists this kind of mess is his specialty. When asked about escape, he flashes a confident grin and promises there is a way out if Rudd will follow his lead. Jaewoo examines the 5 witches under the lair's red glow and mentally recites the weaknesses he worked out over 3 long days. He knows their rivalries and weaknesses intimately and begins shaping a provocation to set them against each other. A briefing names the notorious bosses as the 5 witches of Havel and lists each one: Kaldura, Gunda, Aldaida, Fugel, and Hijiju. The profiles underline their threat and explain why players avoid their territory. Though early game bosses, the witches have claimed thousands of victims and earned a fearsome reputation. Jaewoo notes a contradiction, seeing deeply ingrained infighting between leaders like Hijiju and Fugel that leaves them vulnerable to carefully placed bait. Jaewoo deliberately goads Fugel by bringing up a past slight from Hijiju, and the system confirms the provocation. Fugel snaps to attention, the first link in Jaewoo's plan beginning to strain under a carefully planted insult. Jaewoo repeats that Hijiju once threatened to kill Fugel, prompting the Red Witch to pause. Fugel erupts in fury, and the system reveals the key fact that Fugel hates Hijiju, pushing the group's cohesion toward collapse. Jaewoo feeds more fuel, insisting he heard a promise to seize Fugel's assets, which incites immediate disbelief and anger. Hijiju's amused smirk only sharpens the growing paranoia, and Jaewoo prepares his next subtle lie to deepen the fracture. Hijiju responds to the bait by openly offering a cut, the system noting that provocation has shifted her motives toward greed. Aldaida chimes in cluelessly about the acid bomb plot, showing she cannot read the room as the witches. Arguments begin to spiral. The system populates quick notes on each witch, Gunda's appetite, and Kaldura's eagerness to fight. Those instincts trigger immediate bickering and aggressive posturing, turning the lair into a chaotic brawl rather than a coordinated defense. The witches descend into a full physical scuffle, pulling hair and trading insults as the system announces that Jaewoo has successfully provoked the 5 witches of Hovel. The planned distraction blooms into violent disarray, opening a narrow window for escape. Jaewoo's internal assessment runs over past carnage and concludes that the witches' lethality comes from opportunistic ambushes, not teamwork. The montage of corpses explains why they have so many kills, even though they fall apart when their rivalries are exploited. As the brawl intensifies, Jaewoo urges Rudd to use the chaos to get them out while he executes the next step. Rudd, still stunned by the audacity, accepts and prepares to move when the moment opens. Jaewoo pauses, eyes locking on the witches, acid cauldron, and the volatile reagents nearby, and decides a targeted strike is necessary before they escape. The plan shifts from simple getaway to a decisive sabotage meant to finish the bosses while they brawl. With a single, agile vault through the melee, Jaewoo snatches a hanging vial and sends it spinning into the bubbling cauldron below. The witches look up in confusion as the foreign reagent hits the brew and begins an unexpected reaction. The mixture detonates in a boiling eruption, sending a plume of corrosive steam and debris through the lair. Joe yells for Rudd to run toward the exit and both sprint under falling splinters and smoke toward safety. Damage ticks flash as acid and shrapnel strike the witches, confirming the chain reaction is doing exactly what Jaewoo planned. He races past the scrolling combat log with a sardonic grin, noting the substantial experience those hits will grant once the dust settles. A spectral snake summoned by Fugal lashes out and coils around Jaewoo's legs, suddenly limiting his movement. The system notifies him that the ensnare has reduced his mobility, and Fugal's anger marks the risk of a counterattack. Fugal prepares a desperate strike, declaring she will not fall alone, while the serpent repeatedly lashes at Jaewoo. He struggles and curses as Rudd fights to intervene and reduce the serpent's grip, buying the time needed to free him. Jaewoo's panic flares as he remembers his fragile starter stats, but Rudd does not hesitate and charges with a drawn sword. The hunter aims a clean, lethal swing to cut the serpent's coils and free the younger man. Rudd severs the spectral bind, and Jaewoo scrambles to his feet, gasping and grateful. The hunter checks that he is all right, and Jaewoo manages a shaky thanks as blood and dust clear from his clothes. Jaewoo asks to borrow Rudd's bow, and the hunter hesitates before trusting him with the weapon. The system overlays the bow's stats, showing decent attack and range, and Jaewoo takes it with a focused nod. Taking careful aim with Rue's bow, Jaewoo looses an arrow that sails upward and strikes a volatile flask perched above the witch's platform. The projectile smashes the vessel, sending its contents hurtling toward the bubbling vat below. Shards and reagent rain into the cauldron, and the witches instantly realize this is not a simple spill. Hijiju's alarm and the others' panicked cries register as the mixture begins to seethe with a catastrophic reaction. Alarmed shouts rise as the brew turns into a volatile acid bomb, splashing corrosive green liquid across the platform. The witches scream and flail as the expanding catastrophe forces them to contend with their own creation. The cauldron detonates in a towering explosion that sends a fire plume through the forest canopy and rains debris over the clearing. Jaewoo and Rude take cover, while the system notes minor damage from falling shards, and the witches' nest is consumed by the blast. Rudd asks if the witches are defeated, and Jaewoo forbids premature celebration until the dust clears. The system then confirms a clean sweep, listing each witch as defeated and granting a massive experience reward along with a large achievement point payout. Jaewoo announces the victory, and Rudd breathes a relieved thanks, calling Jaewoo a lifesaver. The younger man privately revels in how lucky he got at such a low level and resolves to secure the rewards before they disappear. Rudd produces a humble pouch and asks Jaewoo to accept the contents as gratitude, and the system announces red dragon fruits obtained. Jaewoo is stunned by the unexpected bounty and notes that these rare fruits did not appear in his memory of earlier playthroughs. Rudd admits he salvaged the valuable fruits from the witches' nest and presses them into Jaewoo's hands. When Jaewoo consumes one, the system triggers a transformation to Dragonbone, instantly boosting his health and pouring golden energy through his body. The UI flashes massive stat gains, HP plus 200, strength and dexterity surging, overall health increased, and Jaewoo watches numbers climb in disbelief. He admits to himself that a normal player would never expect such fortune, while Rudd looks on with a quiet, approving expression. Rudd extends a hand and offers Jaewoo the chance to join him as a monster hunter, proposing a mentorship and steady work. Jaewoo chews thoughtfully, the offer dangling as a new route that could turn transient luck into lasting power. The system confirms a new relationship route unlocked with the monster hunter, marking the beginning of a companion feature and mentorship path that will shape Jaewoo's short-term strategy. Rudd repeats the offer, and Jaewoo weighs the possibilities as the system and his transformed stats sit between them. The young man hesitates, calculating how a temporary alliance could convert raw experience into lasting advantage. Jaewoo initially declines, citing other plans, and Rudd teases him for being a busy young man. A thought then flickers through Jaewoo's mind about wasted experience that will vanish if unspent, and the offer suddenly looks more like an opportunity than an obligation. Rudd proposes a 3-month arrangement as he departs, and Jaewoo asks whether that will be enough time, flashing a casual hand gesture. Rudd laughs and teases that 3 years might be more realistic, but the tone is warm, and the partnership window is set. Under clear skies and a faint rainbow, Rudd and Jaewoo walk together along the forest path toward the road, the ruined witch's nest falling away behind them. Their new mentorship route begins as they head toward civilization with plans and the hard-won rewards in hand. Rudd drops down onto the rocks, sword and bow at his side, and orders Han Jaewoo to head into the forest and hide anywhere he likes, promising to come after 30 minutes. Jaewoo moves upstream, scanning for a place to vanish into the trees. The informal test of the hunter's hazing begins as Rudd steps back and watches the apprentice slip away. Han Jaewoo considers the monster tracking skill tucked in the hunter tree and notes Rudd's quick progress. He uses his knowledge of the forest and sprints across the stepping stones to create misleading trails. Every movement aims to hide his trail while testing Rudd's tracking. Han Jaewoo plants false marks and bursts forward, relying on terrain memory learned from countless passes through this wood. Dragonbone strength from the red dragon fruit boosts his vaulting and speed, letting him break line of sight and mask scent in the water. He trusts that his memory of every twig will help him stay hidden. Han catalogs hazards as he moves, noting how dense trees disorient direction and how scattered toxic mushrooms send poison spores into the air. He spots sleeping predators and reminds himself that ferocious beasts here can be worse than witches. He skirts signs of sleeping animals and sets up a blind rather than risk a wakeful encounter. The forest map runs through Han Jaewoo's head, almost fully imprinted and ready to use. Enhanced by the red dragon fruit, his physical abilities feel near their limit, and he assumes Rudd will not find him easily. Then something in the woods shifts and he pauses, alert and curious. Rudd appears mere steps behind him and teases with a playful peek, "Abu!" that makes Han jump. The mentor inspects the trail and awards 50 points for the find, adding 10 bonus points for Han's obvious effort. The monster tracking skill proved its worth when Rudd tracked him in under 30 minutes. Han scrambles upright and asks how Rudd tracked him so fast. Rudd only smiles, noting that Han's expression betrays his curiosity, and admits it has been a long time since a student made training this enjoyable. The easy banter shifts the test into a formal continuation of the hunter's trial. Rudd moves along the path and urges them both to give the next phase their best effort. The system confirms completion of the hunter's hazing, and immediately updates the quest to hunter's trial. The party composition and objectives shift toward formalizing Jaewoo's hunter progression. The system grants Han Jaewoo the monster hunter class and unlocks core skills: herbalism, intermediate swordsmanship, survivalism, musket shooting, and monster tracking at proficiency level 1. The blue interface confirms the class acquisition that stabilizes his Guardian of Humanity Express. Han accepts the new toolkit that will shape his next moves. Han pledges to work well with Rudd as their training wraps, and the story jumps forward 3 months to a forest camp where the mentor conducts a post-training evaluation. Rudd reacts with surprised admiration as he begins to assess whether Jaewoo truly mastered the hunter skills. Rudd inspects the traps and reports his impression as impressive, but Jaewoo pushes back with a grin and dares the master to hide. Rudd praises Jaewoo's spirit, setting up a reverse-seek evaluation to test whether the apprentice can find him as well as he was found. Rudd agrees to hide with a playful wager that if Jaewoo fails within an hour, dinner is on him. Jaewoo accepts and immediately locks into a focused tracking state. The friendly challenge becomes another real test of his newly acquired skills. Rudd climbs a cliff face and confesses that finding a spirited apprentice at this stage of his life is a pleasant surprise. He settles into a difficult but reachable hiding spot, reminding himself not to make the test unnecessarily cruel. The mentor watches from above and waits for Jaewoo's approach. Rudd reasons that a cliffside blind would be safe for an hour, but movement in the trees alerts him and he turns with a puzzled, "Huh." Han Jaewoo emerges at the rim, having closed the distance with advanced tracking movement that leaves Rudd stunned at his speed and precision. Han springs up at the cliff edge with a grin and a teasing peek, "Boo!" that leaves Rudd momentarily speechless. The mentor's surprise says it all, as Jaewoo completes the find in a fraction of the allotted time. The practical shows that tracking plus terrain memory and boosted stats make him unexpectedly effective. A series of quick finds follows as Jaewoo tracks Rudd from one hiding place to the next without fail. Rudd relocates across the forest, and each time the apprentice calls out, "There you are," with casual confidence. Rudd realizes that training that took him years was absorbed by Jaewoo in 3 months, and he cannot hide his stunned respect. Rudd edges into a cavern and tries to reassure himself that Jaewoo would not follow so deep, but a low chorus of breath warns otherwise. He recognizes where he is and finally admits that this place is a hellhound's nest. The presence of sleeping pack animals raises the stakes for any approach. Han appears at the cavern rim and offers a lesson with the tone of someone who knows arcane rules, introducing his first tip from the Guardian of Humanity. He reveals that sleeping hellhounds will not wake even from earthquakes, then moves carefully past the den without triggering the pack. His niche knowledge lets him thread the most dangerous spots safely. Han challenges the master with a confident, "Do I pass?" And Rudd can only stammer an affirmative, then admit under his breath that the performance was simply amazing. Jaewoo clears the hunter's trial practical by navigating extreme scenarios, including the Hellhound Den, without provoking combat. Rudd marvels that the hunter skills came together for Jaewoo in just 3 months. Han responds with a playful display of a 5-hit flourish, explaining that massive express gain from witch hunting let him level multiple skills rapidly. Their rapport mixes pride and light boasting as the training ends. Rudd compliments Jaewoo on remembering every monster ecology tip, and the apprentice answers with a grin, claiming authorship of the knowledge as if joking. Rudd laughs and tells him he's never met anyone like him and that Jaewoo is bound for big things. The exchange seals their mentor and protege relationship. Rudd asks what comes next and whether Jaewoo will pursue a previously mentioned task. Jaewoo decides to focus on income first, noting simply that everything starts with cash. He scans the road toward the city, planning the next practical step to fund his progression. Rudd proposes mercenary work, mentioning a close friend who could open doors. Han evaluates the option and recognizes mercenary work as the fastest path to steady early income and useful contacts. The mercenary proposal moves from idea to plan in his head. Han weighs the mercenary life for its freedom, variety of combat, and the chance to meet influential figures within the game. The idea of encountering guardians appeals to his long game, and he agrees out loud, saying, "I'll do it, mercenary it is." Rudd reacts with interest, pleased to have set the plan in motion. Rudd presents his old mercenary badge and tells Han that carrying it will make his friend recognize and accept him immediately. He wishes Jaewoo luck and uses the full name Valor Stred Valor as a formal send-off. Han accepts the badge and answers respectfully, ready to enter the mercenary world. Han runs through the trees feeling the momentum of his progress, thrilled that witch hunting yielded both express and a class. He calls the results a great start and allows himself the hope that with this pace even a happy ending could become possible. The momentum pushes him toward the next leg of the journey. Aquila's voice echoes in Han's memory, asking whether he wants to see the end, and a token of thanks or fate glints in his hand. He recalls her suggestion that a clue to the true ending exists, and clenches his fist at the thought of pursuing that route. The promise of a true, ending clue steels his resolve. Han accepts the game's lethal uncertainty and embraces the tension as fuel, promising to use it to his advantage. He calls out to Aquila and sets off toward the road with new determination, and Rudd falling in behind. The pursuit of the true ending becomes an active sprint rather than a distant dream. Han vows to reach the true ending as the system confirms completion of the Hidden Hunter's trial quest. A new objective appears: join the Mercenary Guild. The scene shifts to a vast cosmic motif, underscoring the larger game forces watching, and the new path that just opened. In a cosmic observation room, Aquila watches Han's exploits on a monitor and delights in his evasive cleverness, calling the witch escape priceless. She admits she kept a close eye on him and then prepares to receive an approaching visitor as golden light gathers nearby. Her amused oversight hints at larger designs. Golden pathways unfold across the void as a divine presence descends toward Aquila's floating lounge. Furniture drifts in the microgravity of the observation chamber, while Aquila shifts her attention to the approaching guest. The arrival feels stately and significant, a meeting above the game's world. Footsteps announce the divine arrival, and a voice asks if the figure on the monitor is the one they've been watching. Another replies that he is no ordinary player, and Aquila teases her companion about being taken with him. The newcomer introduces herself as Valfurga, the goddess who just appeared. Valfurga steps forward, haloed and solemn, calling out Aquila's name. She flatly asks why a god should indulge human affection towards someone she protects, maintaining divine distance. Aquila answers with a tease that the human is cute, and the two gods reveal different attitudes toward players and purpose. Valfurga's expression softens as she asks a practical question about a debt, hinting at past obligations. Aquila chides her for being dour, and reminds her that whatever debt existed was settled long ago. The exchange reveals Aquila's hidden involvement in Han's off-screen affairs. Valfurga realizes that Han remains unaware his real-world debt was already paid, and she wonders aloud that he still toils for it. Aquila confirms with a playful "yep" and admits she finds the situation entertaining because Han radiates life and drive. The gods view his struggle as a source of amusement and intrigue. Valfurga scolds Aquila for her ruthlessness and asks directly whether Han is part of a larger plan or merely a plaything. Aquila smiles but dodges a direct answer, preferring to watch and enjoy the unfolding story for now. The gods' ambiguous motives add a new layer to the stakes. Aquila hums and leans back in her chair, savoring the moment without giving Valfurga a clear reply. The goddess waits for a more concrete explanation, but Aquila stays evasive and dismissive. Their quiet exchange keeps Han's fate an open question between amusement and design. Aquila's amusement shifts to keen interest as she labels Han a, quote, promising talent, eyes glowing with appraisal. On the monitor, Han sprints through the forest, and the goddess watches every move with a measuring gaze. Her selective patronage hints at potential future intervention or testing. Aquila decides to maintain observation and instructs her associate to keep watching Han. The system reminds the player that experience gained as the guardian of humanity will decay after 1 month if left unused, underscoring why Han must act quickly. Story panels continue while promotional content is irrelevant to the plot. Han collapses and groans about his aching legs after the long push, and the system flags him as exhausted. He scoots toward the tree line and complains that the forest feels unexpectedly arduous. Even with class boosts, the march to the city has taken a toll on his body. Han catches his breath and notes that only his current, enhanced body allowed him to reach the city in half a day. He decides it is time to move on and sets his sights on the town below. From the ridge, he can see the Mercenary Corps headquarters and knows his next destination is within reach. The tavern bell rings as Han pushes open the door, and a cheerful voice welcomes him to Francois, the best tavern in Frankfurt. Warm light and the hum of patrons spill into the entryway as he steps into the classic hub for information and mercenary contacts. The room promises leads if he can find the right person. Two waitresses greet Han with bright smiles and ask how they can help, and he nervously explains he is looking for someone. They usher him toward a seat while he notes that taverns are the classic place to gather mercenary intelligence. He scans the crowd for likely contacts. The tavern bustles with drink, laughter, and the smell of roasted meat, and Han trusts that this is where mercenary talk gathers. He watches people loosen their tongues in merriment, knowing the relaxed mood will make questions easier to ask. He waits for an opening to steer conversation toward the core. The waitresses give Han a friendly welcome and he leans forward, dropping the name Rebus Schultz while sounding casual. The moment the name leaves his lips, the room stills and faces turn, the tavern's mood shifting from merry to tense. He senses the change instantaneously. Silence floods the common room and patrons avert their eyes as the name Rebus Schultz is spoken. A waitress stammers that the name is forbidden in this tavern and another trembles, warning that he is too dangerous. The casual inquiry suddenly reads as a provocation in a place full of wary mercenaries. A terrified waitress recalls a boyfriend who got involved with Rebus and returned a wreck, while the system notes the inn's morale dropping. Other patrons exchange nervous stories about bad outcomes from inns with that name. Han's stomach drops as he wonders under his breath which Rudd introduced him to. A waitress grabs Han and begs him to run before the dangerous man arrives, and a heavy hand suddenly taps his shoulder. He turns, flinched and confused, as a deep voice asks aloud in a rough tone who just moved past. The presence feels huge and immediate. A massive figure fills the entrance and introduces himself in a low voice as Rebus Schultz, the name everyone feared. Han glances down and sees Rudd's mercenary badge glinting at his own waist, the recognition token linking him to the newcomer. He can only manage a stunned, "Huh," at the coincidence and the danger now in the room. Rebus plucks the badge into view and asks if the token belongs to Rudd, which makes Han wonder aloud when the transfer happened. Rebus grins at the recognition and declares that means Jaewoo must be the one he seeks, laughing that he was looking for a companion for battle. The mercenary's eager, dangerous tone turns the conversation into an immediate offer. Han Jaewoo freezes, hearing the name and feeling the room tilt with danger. Rebus Schultz laughs, the grin wide enough to make everyone flinch, and he jokes that he was only kidding. The tension eases a fraction, but the implication remains. This is a recruitment, not a simple greeting. Han Jaewoo realizes he has been swept into a larger conflict, musing that he might be dragged into the war between the prince, Elector, and the forces of Pesamot. Rebus Schultz treats it like an opportunity, flatly stating that Han will adapt quickly, and that this path leads into the Elector's struggle. The pair walk through Frankfurt while wary merchants and guards keep their distance from the conversation. Han Jaewoo jokes that it feels like conscription, but the mercenary leader turns the situation into salesmanship, calling the chance a great opportunity. The laughter between them is loud enough to pass as camaraderie, and the city continues around their purposeful stride. Han recognizes the prince, Elector, as a guardian of the game, and one of the electors of Pulse, a direct line to information about the other guardians. The presence of the Elector changes the walk into a strategic opening, since contact could yield crucial intelligence. A trumpet announces the procession as the Elector's forces move through the city. Rebus Schultz points toward the approaching column and announces the arrival of the prince, Elector's procession. A system prompt immediately registers an ambush, reducing Han's HP by 30, despite the non-hostile nature of the march. Townspeople identify the arrival as the Elector's procession, and the square fills with attention and tension. A mounted unit of armored knights rides through the square in strict formation, drawing admiration and nervous respect. Rebus jokes that he would fit right in with such a unit, while Han notes inwardly that this is different from what he remembered. The Elector's contingent parades past, carrying obvious military authority. The prince, Elector, passes by in full regalia, and a system note confirms that Han has seen a guardian. Han briefly judges the Elector's look as villainous, then his attention snaps to someone else arriving. The new presence makes him tense with recognition and unresolved worry. A winged, crest helmet appears at speed, and Dame Valpurgis charges into the square on horseback, the name carrying immediate weight among the onlookers. The elite knight's arrival is unmistakable and draws murmurs of recognition, anchoring her importance to Han and to the Elector's force. The mounted charge quiets the market for a heartbeat as she rides past. The prince, Elector, watches his elite and notes a subtle distraction in her demeanor. He asks if anything is wrong and observes that she seems distracted. Dame Valpurgis replies with a soft acknowledgement as they prepare to move out toward the battlefield. Dame Valpurgis answers the Elector with a formal affirmation, and then the mounted unit departs, heading for the front. Han Jaewoo watches them go, the sight cementing a new objective in his mind and a possible line of contact with the Elector's forces. The procession becomes the route out of the city toward Harfheim Hill. Memories flash of past playthroughs where Dame Valpurgis fought alongside Han but died to monstrous forces each time. The repeated failures have burned into his determination, and he cannot shake the memory as the present unfolds. In the square, Rebus notices Han's distraction and checks if he is all right. Han shakes off the panic and resolves that this time he will change the ending, even if he must risk his life. He sets his goal clearly: reach an ending where Dame Valpurgis survives. That quiet resolution steels him as the battlefield looms on the horizon. Rebus leads Han into a broad training yard, where mercenaries spar in multiple rings, practicing strikes and grappling. Han takes in the scale and intensity, noting the energy and raw skill on display. The area serves as Rebus-Chaltz's recruitment and evaluation ground for the coming battle. A system prompt registers that they have entered Rebus-Chaltz's training grounds. The leader announces that group leaders will be chosen through sparring matches and that prize money is on the line. The announcement turns training into an impromptu tournament and draws a crowd eager for fights and profit. Veteran mercenaries boast about pride and prize money, while Han keeps his profile low and privately plans to focus on contacting the prince, Elector, instead of winning every fight. He decides silence and observation are his best strategy for now. The crowd continues to shout and jockey for the next duel. Rebus claps Han on the shoulders and announces that the newcomer will participate in the sparring matches, confident that Rudd would not send someone useless. Han protests that his opinion was not asked, but the leader's confidence turns protest into a grin and propels him into the ring. Enrollment into the selection fights becomes inevitable. Rebus calls out for anyone who wants a round with the newbie, and the mercenaries respond eagerly, shouting about fresh meat. Fighters push forward, volunteering to test the newcomer's mettle. A queue forms quickly as Han is shuffled into position under an eager crowd. Han realizes the crowd will not let him refuse and resolves that he must seize some power first. The mercenaries argue over who goes first while a ring forms, and Han adopts a basic sparring stance consistent with intermediate swordsmanship. He braces himself for a string of quick matches. A burly mercenary steps forward and introduces himself as Max, officially challenging Han to a duel and taunting the newcomer's scrawny frame. Han offers his alias, Valorstred Valor, and struggles to match the bravado. Rebus calls for readiness as the first match is set to begin. The fight begins on Rebus's signal, and Max charges with a heavy overhead swing designed to crush inexperienced opponents. Han remains composed, watching timing and rhythm rather than matching brute force. The crowd leans in as the opening exchange will determine momentum for the rest of the sparring. Max's attack is neutralized instantly by Han's counter, and the aggressor collapses flat in a single technical maneuver. The system registers the victory with a confirmation that Max has been defeated. The stunned silence from the crowd turns quickly into shocked murmurs, as the scale of Han's strength becomes obvious. A system notification awards fame for the win and the crowd erupts, demanding to know what just happened. Han thinks through the change in his own strength, noting that recent gains put his power on a different tier. Mercenaries press forward, eager to be next, convinced they can either test or topple the newcomer. Matches come in quick succession and Han moves through them using a mix of intermediate sword techniques, binding maneuvers to restrain opponents, and a brutal headbutt to finish. Each successful method adds to his fame as the system tallies rewards. The mercenary ring becomes a rapid montage of skill application against human foes. A massive mercenary, known as Charlotte, steps up with outrage at his subordinates being defeated by a rookie and declares himself the next opponent. The system notifies that the champion is engaging and the yard tightens its focus. Han grits through fatigue and prepares for an even tougher test. Facing Charlotte's towering presence, Han's panic spikes, and he instinctively tries to log out, but the system refuses him escape. The realization that the binding prevents logout sinks in and forces him to accept the stakes of the fight. There is no retreat from the real consequences he faces on this field. Han pleads for a single minute's rest, but Charlotte refuses, dismissing the request with a grunt. Denied recovery, Han breathes deep and steels himself to continue, the urgency of saving a past companion overriding his desire for a break. The crowd presses in, as the next exchange begins immediately. Charlotte charges with a full, body-grappling assault, and Han narrows his focus to counter the inevitable grab. The aggressor's intent to seize and crush is clear in every step, forcing Han to deploy a decisive answer, rather than dodge and hope. He prepares a technique that uses his opponent's momentum against him. Han commits to a specialized grappling throw that turns the champion's own weight into a weapon, lifting Charlotte off his feet and rotating the larger man through the air. The maneuver is precise and driven by leverage rather than pure strength. The crowd watches breathless as the champion becomes the projectile in a brutal arc. Charlotte connects with the ground in a crater, inducing slam that sends dust and shattered earth into the air, leaving him stunned and disoriented. Spectators reel at the force of the impact, and the champion's spiral, eyed daze confirms the move's effectiveness. Whispers spread through the yard about the name of the technique and the power behind it. The system registers the high-profile victory and awards significant fame, prompting stunned murmurs from the mercenaries. Men who once scoffed now shout that Han has defeated Charlotte and call him a monster in astonished admiration. Rebus watches with a calculating smile as recruits and veterans alike begin to reassess the newcomer. Hands grab and pull Han toward eager challengers, who want their chance at glory against the scrawny but deadly fighter. He protests for rest and bargains for a moment, but the crowd's enthusiasm is relentless. Suddenly, a commanding voice booms, cutting through the chaos and ordering everyone to give space. Rebus steps into the ring of snarling mercenaries and exerts control without drawing a blade, his presence enough to hush the pack. Han allows himself a small, touched smile at the protection shown, wondering if the leader's care is due to his connection with Rudd. The yard obeys as discipline returns under Rebus's shadow. Rebus points decisively and announces that Han has been chosen as the new group leader for the upcoming battle, elevating the newcomer into a command role in front of the corps. Han stands dumbstruck at the sudden responsibility while the mercenaries react to the unexpected appointment. Leadership falls on him by merit of the sparring results. Rebus' mercenary corps forms ranks around Han, seasoned veterans taking position with spears, shields, and grim faces. The unit is compact, battle-ready, and clearly meant to operate as an elite strike team within the Elector's larger force. Han absorbs the sight of hardened men aligning under his temporary command and steels himself for the mission. A system notification confirms Han's hidden quest completion to join the Mercenary Corps, and immediately updates a new war quest to retake Harfheim Hill. The objective establishes the larger stakes and the operational goal for the coming engagement. Side trivia notes that Charlotte's younger sister, Baptiste, manages the Francois Tavern, tying the local politics to war logistics. A portrait introduces Baptiste, the tavern manager linked to Charlotte's household, reminding Han of how local lives connect to the larger conflict. A caption places the scene in Frankfurt, noting that the Prince Elector is engaged in a standoff with Pesamut on Harfheim Hill, which frames the strategic urgency. The page finishes with promotion material that does not affect the story. Harfheim Hill stretches out as a vast battlefield, human lines of the Elector's army and allied mercenaries arrayed against the orc legions of Pesamut. The scale is massive, with block formations, cavalry squares, and dense spear lines ready for deployment. The silence before the first command hums with imminent violence. Rebes raises his voice and issues the order to charge as the human infantry surges forward in coordinated waves. Orc shock troops at the front line bare their fangs and brace for impact as the two armies collide. The first clash erupts into spears and blades meeting, converting all the preparation into raw contact. Han leads his assigned group directly into the orc ranks, carving a path through staggered enemies with quick strikes and tight footwork. He notes that his unit is temporarily aligned with the Prince Elector's forces for the larger objective. Each gap they force opens a route deeper into the enemy formation, serving the broader plan. Reeves outlines a simple and dangerous mission: seize the enemy commander's military flag to collapse the orc lines. His plan hinges on exploiting a gap when the front ranks reload and the enemy formation falters. Men take the objective in, aware that flag capture would cause collapse and chaos for the orc army. Rebes traces the surge on a crude map, instructing the corps to force a breach and then collapse the enemy's lines around the planted flag. He warns that orcs are proud, strong, and unusually well coordinated, making timing and precise coordination critical. Then he singles out Han to carry a key role in the execution of the plan. Rebes places the responsibility on Han as group leader to stop the targeted wedge and hold the breach. Han advances and meets deflecting simultaneous blows with precise footwork and timing, rather than trying to match strength. He absorbs no direct hits, relying on agility and technique to carve their advance. Mid-fight, Han blurts that leadership was ridiculous, admitting inwardly that his original plan had been to snatch military merit and slip away. Despite the confession, he keeps moving, dual, wielding, and cutting space for his men as the fighting titans. Reluctance gives way to action when lives and the mission demand it. At the orc command post, a subordinate rushes in with alarming news that spear formations are breaking and collapsing in places. The captain roars disbelief that his elite spearmen are failing, a reaction that reveals how unexpected Han's unit's impact has become. The orc leadership scrambles to understand and respond to the local collapse. An orc officer snatches a scope and climbs a raised platform to survey the field, scanning for the source of the disruption. He sweeps the lines with the glass and frowns, seeing the breach and the newcomer's path through the musket ranks. Confusion spreads as the officer tries to reconcile the sight with his expectations. Orc observers gape and shout incredulously, asking what the anomaly is as Han plows through the front line with his squad. A nearby human officer seizes the moment and barks orders to smash the enemy completely, driving soldiers into the gap Han created. The orc onlookers feel the gravity of the breach as panic edges in. The orc commander rapidly forms ranks and orders the musket blocks to line up, preparing to unleash a disciplined volley. Musketeers shoulder their rifles, wheels of fire rotating through firing ranks to maintain sustained pressure. Orders come sharp and practiced as the orcs attempt to re-establish a defensive boundary. Volley fire slams into shields and men, chipping away at defenses as the system notes shield durability dropping with each impact. Han analyzes the musket tactic and dismisses the weapons as flawed without rapid-fire capability, noting that the enemy must rotate firing ranks to reload. He times his movements to exploit the reload window that inevitably follows the first bank of shots. When the second bank prepares to fire, Han thinks, now is the time. And the Prince Elector's heavy infantry and cavalry charge into the reload gap. The human units strike hard at the moment the musketeers must swap positions, converting the temporary lull into a decisive shock. The battlefield shifts as disciplined timing yields an opening. Han sprints full tilt into the musket line, cutting through the front guards with rapid, targeted strikes aimed at the unit holding the enemy standard. Orc standard. Bearers stare in disbelief and shout that it cannot be, watching their guard fall before a single lithe warrior. The flag and its elite protectors become the immediate focus. As the mission to seize the military standard becomes urgent, an orc plants the sacred banner and steels himself, holding the symbol of his tribe as if it were a relic. Valor closes the distance in a blur, cutting through the front line toward the flag while stunned soldiers and fallen orcs litter the ground. The stage is set for a single desperate act that could change the battle. Valor fights through the crowd beneath the flapping banner, the flag snapping in the wind above him. He braces himself under the weight of the moment and forces his body to keep moving toward the prize. The soldiers erupt in cheers as Valor pulls the military flag free and lifts it in triumph. A system notice confirms the theft with leadership and achievement gains, which only sharpens his focus on holding out long enough to claim military merit. A distant trumpet cuts the celebration and a comrade warns that allied formations are pulling back, leaving Valor exposed. The mini tactical map makes it clear that the breach is temporary and the window is closing. Orc reinforcements surge into the gap like a living wall, nullifying the fragile advantage Valor just created. He grits his teeth as the possibility of victory collapses into the immediate need to survive. A panicked teammate asks if they should abandon the prize and run, but Valor rejects the idea outright and pushes back against surrender. The men exchange terrified looks as they realize retreat is already underway around them. The remaining soldiers hurry to form a desperate perimeter, while orc ranks tighten in a ring that leaves nowhere to go. Faced with encirclement, Valor feels the weight of the trap settling over them. A massive figure steps out of the orc lines and claims the spotlight as their grand general, his presence transforming the field into a ritual stage. He orders the humans to surrender and fall back, asserting a command no ordinary officer could enforce. The general advances with disciplined elite soldiers at his back, but Valor answers with brazen mockery, dragging the flag and daring the orcs to close in. His bravado is a gamble and a provocation, not a plea for mercy. Kalyan reacts to Valor desecrating the banner, and a system notice registers an attempted intimidation against the general. The attempt fails to sway the orc commander, and the enemy force tightens, furious, rather than cowed. Kalyan gives the command to prepare their musketeers, and human soldiers brace as firing lines shift into position. The flag flutters over Valor like a fragile trophy surrounded by lethal intent. The orc musketeers unleash a disciplined volley that tears through shields and ranks, forcing Valor's men to struggle under a barrage of lead. Every shot threatens to erase the small advantage Valor bought with his audacity. A system prompt confirms that Valor's intimidation has failed, and he realizes the truth of countless past playthroughs. This army will not give up its banner. The realization tightens his chest as musket fire continues around them. Close quarters chaos explodes as shots find gaps in armor, and men stagger under sudden wounds. Valor watches allies fall and feels how thin their defenses have become. The troops admit they cannot match a monster of that caliber at their current fame and rank, and fear starts to spread like a contagion. Valor stands at the center of that doubt, torn between holding the flag and preserving lives. Memories flash through Valor's head, faces, and a warning about death that feel more like a prophecy than a memory. Those shards of recollection remind him that dying in this world carries a price that might not reset. A chilling echo from the past warns that dying in this game could mean dying for real, and that vision drives a raw scream from Valor. His men cry out for leadership and demand a plan before they're wiped out. Valor answers his men with a strange resolve and forces himself to form a plan, masking fear with the smallest, desperate smile. He knows that hesitation here will cost lives, and perhaps more. Valor unleashes an almost hysterical laugh to shake off panic and rally those around him, buying a moment of stunned silence. Someone lunges for the trumpet, and the battlefield shifts toward a new, daring gambit. A soldier reports that no help is on the way, and Valor snaps back with defiant profanity to banish the fatalism. He refuses to accept being abandoned, and prepares to force a path through the gunfire. Valor raises the trumpet and blows with everything he has, directing a signal that rips through the lines in the wrong direction and sows confusion among the orc ranks. The noise creates a sliver of chaos that might be exploited. He orders his men to use their shields as living walls to blunt the incoming volleys, buying the team precious seconds. Valor then locks eyes with Aquila and asks for the one thing that could save them: stand firm and not abandon him. Valor clings to the game mechanic that designates him a VIP, gambling that some system edge will keep him alive. Kalyan counters by ordering spear ranks forward to crush any hope of a clean extraction. An enormous orc prepares a killing strike with a spear raised like an executioner's blade, while his troops roar the name of their archenemy. The moment forces Valor and his men to face the possibility of a single devastating blow. A spear drops toward Valor in a lethal arc, but he twists and uses the motion to drive a counterattack that sends an orc reeling. The exchange buys him another heartbeat, and keeps the flag in human hands. Out of nowhere, a mounted figure launches into the air over the battlefield, and every orc below shifts their gaze, stunned by the audacity. That single silhouette changes the rhythm of the fight and arrests the charge. A helmeted knight on a white steed plows down the orc lines with terrifying momentum. Her arrival has the hallmarks of a commander who can flip morale in an instant, and the battlefield answers to her presence. The rider urges the humans not to give up, and then shouts a single command as she draws a blade that flashes like a promise. The call to arms forces the human side to straighten under a new authority. A carved guardian image and reminder about the orcs' sacred flag emphasize how symbolic this moment is for them. The general's orders to not interfere with a single duel create a dangerous zone where only the challenger and the champion may fight. Kalyan declares that he will face the pale figure alone, naming the Countess as his opponent, and the duel becomes a formal spectacle. Valpurgis steps forward in full plate and meets the general's challenge with steady resolve. Valpurgis addresses her opponent with courteous words and then immediately closes the distance, striking with the speed of someone trained to end fights quickly. Her tactics are surgical, aimed at disabling the general before the larger army regains shape. The duel unfolds as an even contest of steel, each blow answered by an equally precise counter, and Valor can barely hide his amazement. Even at an early stage in her story, Valpurgis demonstrates skill and control that force the entire battlefield to reassess its expectations. Kalyan swings with brute power while she parries and redirects force with elegant motion, each dodge looking effortless. The general's fury grows as his heavy strikes fail to land cleanly against her refined technique. A sharp, decisive strike finds flesh and armor, sending the general stumbling to one knee and shocking his troops into uncertainty. The effect is immediate and contagious as orc morale wavers for the first time. Valpurgis rises, and the once confident orc ranks exchange looks of disbelief and begrudging respect. Soldiers whisper that her hand-to-hand combat and swordsmanship are extraordinary, and that she must belong to a militant order. She declares a devout purpose and then brings the duel to an end, leaving the orc commander broken on the ground. The single decisive stroke causes the orc ranks to spill back in retreat as their leader falls. A crushing downward strike finishes the duel, and the general's roar turns into a pained gasp as the blade finds its mark. With their commander defeated, the orc lines begin to fray, and the momentum of the battle shifts. A last-ditch orc counterattack tries to reclaim a shred of honor, but Valpurgis parries, and the assailant is thrown aside with brutal efficiency. The failed charge exposes how thoroughly the duel disrupted the enemy's cohesion. She soars over the battlefield in a single graceful arc, and delivers the finishing motion that ends the general's resistance. His fall triggers a ripple of retreat as the orcs process that their champion is down. Valpurgis stands tall with sword raised and a blade of light slicing the air, a symbol that the duel has concluded in a way the orcs did not expect. Her posture becomes a rallying symbol for the human side and a decisive moment for the conflict. She turns and walks away while the orc ranks break into disorganized retreat, confirming that the death of a commander shatters enemy morale. Soldiers on both sides look at the aftermath and understand the cost of honor on the field. The call to retreat spreads as orc forces fall back, and Valor watches the field emptying with a stunned, grateful expression. Valpurgis stands nearby in armor, her presence the reason those men can live to march another day. Valor cannot help but acknowledge that her arrival was exactly what they needed, and that her skill turned the tide. The canyon empties as the orcs pull back, confirming that the duel saved the mercenaries' lives. Valpurgis approaches Valor and offers a polite greeting, asking if he leads the mercenary group and offering her hand in recognition. Her manner is formal and sincere, and Valor accepts the gesture with visible relief. They clasp hands, and a system notification acknowledges Valpurgis's respect, underscoring the shift in standing that her intervention produced. Valor admits that, without her, the group would have been wiped out, and gratitude settles over him. She gently questions his downcast posture, and Valor confesses to a quiet shame, knowing his gamble nearly cost everyone everything. The men behind them still see him as their leader, and await his next orders. A veteran steps up to place a token of trust in Valor's hands, and a system confirmation flashes that his credibility among the mercenary corps has risen. The simple act shows that respect can be earned in blood and steel. The men continue to anchor the perimeter under a storm of fire, each soldier pushing back against the pressure with raw determination. Valor watches them hold, understanding that courage now is what will carry them forward. Valor finds a rhythm in the chaos and directs his men with clearer orders, the plan finally fitting into place in his mind. He sees how small decisions combine into a path through the storm, and his tone shifts from panic to purpose. The fight cools into measured breathing, and then into a burst of raw exhilaration, as Valor claims the flag aloud and lets the victory wash over him. Men cheer at his cry, and the stolen banner becomes the symbol of a gamble that paid for the price of survival. In Francois Tavern, the room roars with laughter as mercenaries revel after Harfheim, and Valorstred Valor stands quiet among them, taking in the noise. The tavern sign marks the place where celebration and mockery mix, and the shout for Charlotte draws eyes toward the doorway. Valor watches the cheering, aware how quickly a victory becomes a public story. Baptiste bursts through the door and sprints across the tavern toward Charlotte, panic written all over her face. Charlotte, the giant mercenary, sits bandaged and chewing, while Valor stays close enough to notice every movement. The whole room quiets a beat as the girl reaches his table, the celebration pausing around a sudden, small drama. Baptiste questions whether Charlotte was hurt after another battle, fussing at him as she checks his bandages. Charlotte mumbles that he is fine while continuing to eat, the awkward exchange drawing snide comments from the surrounding soldiers. A quick memory note clarifies that Baptiste is Charlotte's younger sister and the tavern manager, which makes the interruption both personal and protective. Baptiste blames Valor for Charlotte's condition and demands payment for medical bills, turning the tavern into a chorus of embarrassment and teasing. Servers dodge between tables as soldiers laugh and shout, and Valor feels a momentary haze of uncertainty wash over him. Someone hushes Charlotte, trying to keep the peace, while the mercenaries alternate between praise and mockery. Rebiz stands and credits Valorstred Valor for their survival on Harfheim, and the declaration spreads through the crowd until the tavern chants Valor forever. The mood flips from accusation back to celebration as men raise their cups in salute, and even Charlotte listens from the rear while the mercenaries claim the victory as a collective lifeline. The stolen banner and louder voices turn a gamble into a shared emblem of survival. Valor shrugs off the praise with a flippant comment, and the tavern responds with teasing about whether their leader is blushing. Jokes and playful jabs ripple through the tables until the room falls quiet at the sound of a new, commanding presence at the doorway. All attention pivots to the entrance as an armored figure blocks the light and expects to be noticed. Valor turns toward the doorway and sees Dame Valpurgis in full armor, arriving breathless from a fast ride. Her presence cuts through the tavern noise with authority, and Valor recognizes the woman who carries both noble rank and battlefield reputation. They move out together toward the Harfheim forward base, the celebration left behind for duty ahead. Dame Valpurgis escorts Valor through the camp and points out the forward tents as preparations hum around them. She reports that the elector himself has requested an audience, and hints at military honors as the reason for summoning him. Valor accepts the news with quiet composure, though a flicker of surprise crosses his face as they near the command area. Riding between lines of tents, Valpurgis praises the honor of being called before the elector and tells Valor to call her simply Valpurgis as a friend. Valor, embarrassed but respectful, offers the formal Dame Valpurgis in return, keeping the exchange polite while acknowledging the unusual warmth in her tone. Their easy rapport contrasts with the stern purpose of the summons. Valpurgis gestures across the camp to troops who owe their lives to Valor's actions on Harfheim, reminding him that courage saved citizens of the Empire. The point is simple and direct, presented as both affirmation and argument for why he should accept the honors with gratitude. Valor listens in silence, the weight of responsibility and recognition settling around him. A montage of past memories flashes through Valor's mind, showing Valpurgis stepping between harm and him in previous runs. He notes that her character remains constant, the same protector who does not change even when routes diverge. That constancy gives him a small island of certainty in a world where timelines and outcomes shift. Valor reflects that while some things shift, the relationship with Valpurgis endures, and he feels like a mercenary rather than a noble. They approach the strategy tent together and Valpurgis announces his arrival to the officers inside, setting the stage for the formal audience he has been summoned to attend. Inside the command tent, the Elector acknowledges the recent success and addresses Valor with measured politeness, introducing himself as Elector Steele Philip. The campaign map and advisors crowd the table, while officers and reports lay out the operational picture. Valor bows and prepares to offer his report under the gaze of the Empire's guardian. Philip's presence presses down like a physical thing, and Valor realizes what it means to face a true guardian of humanity. He bows and states his honor at the meeting, feeling the Elector's authority shape the room. The pressure is palpable, and Valor steadies himself for the questions to come. Philip mentions Valor's reputation as the Reaper of the Field, and praises the courage that brought men home from Harfheim. Valor deflects the flattery with modesty, offering a simple response that keeps the focus on duty rather than praise. The Elector's demeanor remains composed and superior, a ruler shaped by command and spectacle. Philip announces monetary recognition, awarding Valor 300 florins, while promising smaller sums for the comrades who fought beside him. A quick tally appears, and Valor bows to accept the Elector's generosity, promising to repay the kindness and service. He then asks for a single favor, pausing the room as the officers lean in to hear his request. Valor asks to regroup with his comrades and rest at Wittenbeyer, which he explains is a safer town some distance from the front, and requests a wagon from the supply train. Philip agrees to the withdrawal and authorizes the wagon, granting practical support that recognizes the human cost of battle. Valpurgis remains at Valor's side, a steady witness to the small victory of rest. Philip prompts for any other needs, and the tent falls into a fine silence as Valor hesitates, weighing the danger of speaking up. Normally he would step back, but the world this run has presented convinces him to press on. He steels himself and meets the Elector's eyes, ready to advise on a wider risk that cannot be ignored. Valpurgis shifts forward to support him, and Valor asks permission to voice a concern despite his rank. The room bristles as advisors ready to object, but the Elector's patience allows the lowly mercenary to speak. The tent quiets, more attentive than they expected, and Valor seizes the moment to outline a threat. Philip gives a curt invitation for Valor to speak, and the mercenary steps into the weight of the council room. Everyone turns toward him expecting a cautious comment from a newcomer, which gives Valor the advantage of lower expectations as he prepares to present evidence that reframes the strategy. His breath slows, and he lays out the first of his concerns plainly. A caption names Elector Steele Philip as the Empire's guardian, underlining the scale of the decisions being made in the tent. The question about the war hangs in the air, and all eyes fall on Valor, as if testing the courage behind his warning. The audience is hostile and curious, ready to mock or to listen, and Valor begins with careful clarity. Valpurgis, present, steadies him, while Valor notes that his hesitance has unsettled the tent, and being a lowly mercenary has worked in his favor to deflect scrutiny. The Elector presses for a concrete opinion, bringing the conversation away from ceremony and back to actionable intelligence. Valor prepares to name the patterns he has seen across battles. Valor points out that the Demon King Pezamut has repeatedly relied on ambushes and surprise, citing past wars as precedent, and warning the command tent not to be complacent. Mockery erupts from some staff who find a single mercenary presumptuous, and they deride his right to advise, despite the merit he earned on the field. The room divides along lines of experience and pride, while Valor holds to the facts. Philip's frown deepens, but Valpurgis calmly interjects, invoking a proverb about tapping a stone bridge before crossing and asking why they should not hear Valor out. Her intervention shifts the council's tone and surprises the mercenary, who had not expected such direct aid from a noble. The Elector concedes space for him to continue. An older advisor snaps that a countess should not presume to advise an Elector, but Philip cuts him off by reminding the tent that Valpurgis is related to the Elector of Bayern, and commands respect. Her standing forces the room to acknowledge her and the argument she sponsored, and the council shifts from contempt toward measured attention. The political weight of her family name quiets the loudest skeptics. Valor thinks that Valpurgis' intervention did precisely what it needed to, and even the Steel Elector could not ignore her. Philip allows the conversation to continue and asks Valor to present his assessment, opening the tent to strategy rather than spectacle. Valor breathes deep and prepares to outline the real dangers he has observed. Valor exhales and names the threat plainly, stating that an ambush is incoming and that the pattern fits Pezamut's doctrine of surprise and betrayal. The war room falls silent, as officers suddenly treat him not just as a mercenary but as a potential source of timely intelligence. Heads turn, maps are consulted, and the tone shifts from condescension to urgent planning. The Elector asks for the reasoning behind the claim, prompting Valor to link recent anomalies to Pezamut's historical tactics of ambush and betrayal. He cites the Kingdom of Tia campaign and the Margrave-Anhalt engagement as examples where surprise played a decisive role. The council begins to see the possibility that their current maneuvers invite the same danger. Valor lays out the pattern with quick, sharp references to past battles, where Pezamut's forces struck unexpectedly and turned the tide. Images of demons raining from the sky and coordinated betrayals underscore his point, and he concludes that ambush tactics have repeatedly been decisive in the Demon King's campaigns. The reality of those past lessons settles on the tent like a cold wind. With the ambush risk established, Valor warns that betrayals within allied ranks are also a favorite tactic of Pessimut, suggesting the enemy will exploit human weakness as readily as battlefield openings. Advisors stiffen at the implication that someone inside their lines might be compromised, and the tent begins to consider counterintelligence as seriously as troop movements. The idea of internal subversion shifts priorities immediately. Valor concludes that a traitor among them is a real possibility, and Philip allows the notion to stand framed as prudence rather than panic. The Elector smiles with a politeness that barely conceals calculation, agreeing that caution never hurts as he adjusts to the new angle of threat. The room senses the shift, understanding that suspicion will now travel through their ranks. Philip addresses Valor in tones stripped of ceremony, reminding him of the Elector's power with a blunt statement about life and consequence. Valpurgis starts to object out of instinct but quickly yields when the Elector's authority closes like a door. Valor and his protector bow to the political reality, the tense air thick, with the reminder that power enforces order as much as it offers favor. Outside the tent, Valpurgis lowers her head to Valor in apology for the earlier interruption, recognizing the danger his words invited. Valor offers a calm apology for overstepping into politics, and the two exchange a quiet, mutual respect that acknowledges both the risk and the necessity of speaking up. They walk away from the command tent, aligned in purpose, if not rank. Valor moves through the camp lanes with a mind full of differences, noting that the Elector Steel behaved with unusual boldness compared to earlier runs. The variation nags at him as a potential divergence in the timeline, something that might change how events unfold. He files the observation away as a variable to monitor, knowing that small shifts can become decisive. At the camp edge, Valor studies the horizon and the faces around him, thinking that this version of events feels off, that Philip's swagger is louder and more dangerous than before. He resolves to watch for further deviations and to adapt his plans accordingly, because prior knowledge can be misleading when circumstances change. The mercenary's caution hardens into a plan to stay 2 steps ahead. A rapid list of anomalies flashes through Valor's mind, starting with the early appearance of red dragon fruits and continuing with Valpurgis showing up ahead of schedule. He recognizes these mismatches from countless past runs and concludes that something or someone has altered the usual cadence of events. The realization unsettles him, because altered variables mean altered outcomes. At sunset, Valpurgis races to catch up with Valor and arrives breathless, announcing she finally caught him. The two stand amid the camp bustle, their earlier political theater replaced by this quiet moment of camaraderie. Valor turns to her with curiosity and gratitude, recognizing the practical loyalty beneath her armor. Valpurgis explains she ran across the camp because she feared for Valor after the tense meeting, and her concern is simple and unadorned. Valor thinks her worry is unexpectedly warm, a personal kindness that contrasts with the cold politics they left inside. She asks him to state what he needs and promises to make it happen discreetly. Valpurgis apologizes on behalf of Philip, and opens the floor to Valor to request anything he might need, insisting she will arrange it. The scale of the offer leaves him flustered, imagining extravagant solutions before his mind settles on what will actually matter. He searches for a practical answer while Valpurgis waits expectantly. Valpurgis jokes about noble wealth, and the mercenary pictures a life of money and new clothes, responding with a stammer that only makes the Countess laugh. The moment is absurd and human, and Valor quickly reorients from fantasy to a request that serves his goal rather than personal comfort. The exchange lightens the day and cements a small bond between them. Valor composes himself and asks for 2 simple things, a writing quill and a pistol, explaining neither is meant for vanity but for purpose and training. Valpurgis pauses at the modest request, briefly surprised that his priorities are practical rather than lavish. The choice hints at Valor's plan to learn cavalry and firearms, and at how small tools can shape big futures. Valpurgis protests that the audience offered a once-in-a-lifetime chance, but Valor explains his dream to become a cavalryman, and that the pistol is part of that future. Tears prick his eyes as he speaks of training and a trade he wants to master, and the Countess, puzzled and moved, agrees to arrange the support. The promise of learning turns gratitude into a quiet, human victory. Valpurgis admits she has never seen such unselfishness in a man, and Valor briefly reflects on the sacrifices he has made to reach this point. She then announces that the camp is no place for sentimental talk, and that she will handle his requests away from prying ears. The arrangement gives Valor both cover and relief as they move to implement the small plan. Valpurgis takes the lead and motions for Valor to follow, and they hurry through the crowded tents and stacks of supplies, toward where she will arrange the tools he asked for. Valor keeps pace, attentive to every turn and whisper among the soldiers, ready to accept the practical training the Elector's favor will now enable. Their steps carry them toward the next stage of preparation. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the massed formations on the plain, and an announcement that the battle to reclaim pitting Elector Steel Philip against Demon King Pessimut. The scale is enormous. Troops are arrayed like blades on a map, and Valor moves from personal plans into the sweep of a campaign that will test every decision. On the field, Philip rides at the head of his forces, raising his voice to declare this the day he will kill Pessimut, and the call carries across both armies. The demon lines answer with a mix of mockery and disbelief, some soldiers scolding their commander for boasting loudly about the Elector's breath. The banners and ranks form a theater for the confrontation to come. In the demon command, a horned lieutenant reports that preparations for war are complete, and Pessimut receives the news with approval. A subordinate presses him about using hexacs. warning she may be excessively cruel, and the Demon King responds with impatient reprimand. At that moment, Pezimut's ring vibrates, signaling incoming contact and shifting the focus from internal debate to active coordination. A bound prisoner listens as demons plot that capturing the Elector would make a valuable hostage, and a subordinate insists he can handle the matter personally, despite Hexax's methods. Pezimut's ring thrums with a call, and he murmurs, "Speak of the devil," as Hexax's voice answers through their link, confirming she is present and ready to act on the plan. The connection cements their intent to use espionage and cruelty as tools. Hexax appears eager, skipping through the demon ranks and announcing she is ready to go, her voice a mix of playful malice. Pezimut advises caution and tells her to stay sharp, and she responds with the light laughter of someone who enjoys chaos. Even as he endorses her role, the Demon King hesitates at the thought of unchecked cruelty, a rare human moment of caution amid his schemes. A nervous officer pleads for Hexax to temper her methods, but she only smirks and asks when she has ever gone too far, challenging the notion of restraint. His shouted accusation that she always exceeds the bounds lands without changing her grin, and the demon lions brace for the kind of ruthless infiltration she embodies. The field hums with the promise of an ugly ingenuity about to be unleashed. Hexax perches on a fallen escort and taunts the ruin around her while fingering a glowing ring. She coaxes with a mocking, casual tone and promises she always takes it easy while red power flares in her eye. Pezimut repeats Hexax's mocking line under his breath and straightens as a subordinate calls for attention. The Demon King checks his communication ring while his officers hurry to report movements across the field. Valor rides a spare steed named Philly through the storm and marvels at the mount's unexpected speed. He notes that the horse moves like a mount fit for house iron while he closes on the evacuation route. Valor reads a tooltip that names the item a perfect healing potion, capable of fully restoring any wound and valued at 1,000 florins. The price shocks him as an explosion erupts nearby and he tucks the bottle into his belt while sprinting toward the sound. Valor hears combat ahead and realizes the ambush has started, which means he must hurry. He bets Philip will charge recklessly and pushes his mount into pursuit toward Valpurgis's position. Philip steels himself and grips his sword as retainers laugh behind him, assuming the command of the situation. Dark silhouettes of demons form a line ahead, and the Elector dismounts to confront whoever stands in the road. Philip kneels among ruins and demands to know why an older noble would betray him, calling out the treachery while smoke and fire frame the clearing. The noble keeps his composure as the accusation lands. Friedrich tells Philip he does not yet grasp the full situation, and orders him to listen carefully while demons hold distance. The calm in the uncle's voice only sharpens the gravity of the moment. Friedrich charges Philip with conspiring to rebel against the Emperor, and admits he is cooperating with Pezimut to arrest the Elector for treason. Conjured chains wrap around Philip as the betrayal is made official. Friedrich presses the accusation, asking if the truth is finally sinking in, while Philip protests that the claim is nonsense and tries to reject it. Hands and magic slam him to the ground as his protests are drowned out. Philip spits an insult at his uncle and struggles as Friedrich orders the guards to restrain him. The demon soldiers rush forward immediately to tie the Elector in place. Philip pleads for distance and insists he is a noble Elector, while fear curdles his voice, which only draws a shouted order to shut him up. Dame Valpurgis dives from above and targets the nearest captors to break the circle. Valpurgis delivers a high-flying kick that slams a horn demon back and buys precious space, then plants herself between Philip and the oncoming ranks ready to extract him. Demons curse and regroup around the Night Corps intervention. Valpurgis orders an escort to take the Elector away now, while the extraction toward a narrow pass begins. A demon aide warns Pezimut that Philip might slip free, but the Demon King snaps the complaint aside and maintains control. Pezimut radios Hexax through his ring and directs the operation, while a subordinate expresses surprise at how quickly the target moved. Hexax admits she was merely toying with him, and Pezimut tells her to get serious. Hexax calls the pack into being with a grin and promises mealtime, summoning a wave of red-eyed corpse, hounds from the darkness. The necromantic swarm slides into position to harry and exhaust their prey. Hexax sends her hounds with an instruction to tear through the escort, while Valpurgis rides rear guard and Philip urges his mount onward. The undead pack fans out and closes the distance fast. Valor follows the chase along the ridge and recognizes Hexax's tactic of using zombie dogs to wear down opponents before devouring them. He prepares his weapon and picks the trail that will intercept the main threat heading toward Philip. A dog lunges from Valor's flank and he snaps a clean cut that sends the undead creature flying, blood and gore spraying away. He keeps pace and presses toward the main pursuit route, without breaking rhythm. Valor declares he knows Hexax's pattern and scans the nearby terrain, noting this flank has few hounds, which means most went after Philip. He wheels his mount and accelerates to intercept the larger pack threatening the escort. Valor decides Philip can be set aside when Valpurgis is at risk, and urges his horse down the slope, shouting that he must hurry. He rides hard through the storm toward the knight at the rear of the column. The small column presses down the narrow forest road as a ring of undead hounds tightens the noose, crows scattering above. Valpurgis stays beside Philip, tied to the awkward job of keeping him safe while the pack closes in. Philip feels his mana falter and realizes hostile interference has weakened him while the pack drives the column to extremes. He curses Pezimut under his breath as Valpurgis signals formation changes and fights to hold the line. A zombie hound launches at Philip's mount in a slick turn, and a nearby knight yells that it is dangerous. Valpurgis shifts to intercept and keep the Elector from being torn from his saddle. Philip's face flashes with shock as an attack hits from his blind side, and he stumbles in the saddle. Valpurgis catches the break and prepares to move to his side to re-establish a protective posture. Valpurgis drops a sweeping strike from her mount that cuts a leaping hound in half and follows through with a second slash while passing Philip. She leaps ahead to scan for further attackers and keep the path clear. Valpurgis checks on Philip and he stammers that he is fine despite the near miss, trying to sound composed. She stays tightly beside him as the hounds regroup and charge once more. Valpurgis warns that they have entered unexplored ground and orders extreme caution, while Philip acknowledges her direction. A cry for help echoes from the rear, where an allied knight struggles under a swarm and begs to be saved. An imperial knight is dragged down and bitten by the hounds while shouting to the elector as blood sprays the road. Philip looks back with a hard expression, and Valpurgis braces as if to pivot and assist the fallen man. Valpurgis prepares to ride back and protect the screaming ally, but Philip loudly orders them to leave that man behind, insisting he is different and must be preserved. The command hangs in the rain as Valpurgis reels from the betrayal of duty. Valpurgis fights through the pack, while her thoughts trace the gulf between noble life and common life, reminding herself the electorate bears responsibilities far beyond a single follower. She forces herself to keep standing, despite exhaustion, as more hounds pour in. Philip remembers a council where Valor's warnings were dismissed, and regrets not having listened sooner, but that realization cannot undo the ambush. Valpurgis renews her commitment to protect the column even when strategy fails them. Valor's face flashes in memory, as Valpurgis blames the disaster on ignoring his counsel, and Hexax's laugh answers from the shadows. The demon rushes in with a strap-like weapon, while Valpurgis counters with a swift, defensive swing. Hexax lands a brutal blow across Valpurgis's chest that staggers the knight and makes her call out to Philip. The elector is pitched forward by his mount as the knight struggles to remain upright under direct assault. Valpurgis scrambles to keep Philip from being unseated, armor clattering as she sprints to re-establish the protective posture. Every motion costs her, and she forces breath into her lungs while the fight presses in. A violent impact sends Valpurgis and Philip tumbling to the muddy forest floor, and she scrapes her armored hand as she slides. She admits the danger aloud, acknowledging how close the column stands to disaster as pursuers circle closer. Bent and bleeding, Valpurgis forces herself up and repeats that as an elector, the office demands strength, trying to steel her resolve for a last stand. Hexax steps in and readies her strap weapon for the finishing move. Hexax mocks the weight of elector power and taunts Valpurgis about her bloodline while playing with her whip, her irises glowing red. The implication that other infiltrators are nearby hangs like a threat in the rain. Pezimut is revealed as the demon king of blood and death, the continent's most powerful necromancer who uses charm and betrayal to manipulate human politics. Friedrich is named as Philip's uncle and a secret collaborator working with the demon king. Valpurgis demands Hexax take back her words and defends the electorate's weight by explaining that electors traditionally choose the next emperor and rule like sovereigns in their territories. Her voice insists the office must never be demeaned. Hexax stresses that the position is not to be taken lightly, and orders her forces to keep tracking Philip while her agents obey. She taunts Valpurgis about being of elector blood, and tightens her grip on the strap weapon as she prepares the next strike. Valpurgis's eyes harden. She charges and launches a leaping strike at Hexax's head in a desperate counter. Hexax faints and asks if the jab hit a nerve, while she raises the strap to meet the incoming blow. Hexax darts into close range, and Valpurgis reels from the sudden maneuver, exchanging a flurry of counterstrikes as blades and straps crack through the air. The pair trade blows in a rapid, dangerous dance with no one else intervening. Hexax laughs delightedly at Valpurgis's pain, and says she only wants to mess with the knight more as she drives the strap unpredictably. Valpurgis grits her teeth and forces the attack back, pushing Hexax through trees while parrying the whip's erratic strikes. Valpurgis fights forward on trembling legs and then slows, chest heaving as blood and rain sting her vision. She whispers Sir Valor's name in hope that aid will arrive and braces for another exchange with Hexax. Memories of Valor charging through impossible odds fill Valpurgis's mind, and she tells herself that if it is Valor, he will find a way to overcome this crisis. Still, she concedes this may be as far as she can go and steels herself to hold the line as long as possible. Another petite demon bursts in and screams that the assault is not over, rushing to reinforce Hexax with a forward lunge. The newcomer's presence turns the duel into a 2-against-1 fight as she drives a weapon into the space Valpurgis must defend. Hexax stops mid-attack, puzzled by a small dog corpse lying on the path, as if placed there deliberately. She senses movement behind her and turns, just as a figure closes the distance from the rear. Hexax frowns at the dog corpse and mutters that it is a corpse before a cloaked combatant launches from behind and strikes her head with a high-velocity blow. The attacker sends Hexax flying and the strike ends the scene with a sudden, brutal interruption. Dame Valpurgis staggers to one knee on the forest path and finally collapses forward, armor dented and breath ragged. Valor steps out from the trees, cloak drawn and pistol still holstered, moving in to shield her. The helmeted knight manages a trembling whisper of Valor's name as hope flickers in her voice. Valor closes the distance slowly, eyes sweeping the dark tree line for any remaining threats, while keeping Valpurgis between himself and the open road. He stays low and cautious, every step measured to avoid alerting hidden demons. The wounded knight watches him with wet eyes, barely able to hold on to the single name that keeps her tethered. N/A. Dame Valpurgis forces a grateful admission that he really is a hero, the words escaping like a small surrender of relief. Valor holds his posture, the pistol unused but ready, letting that single recognition settle between them as he prepares the next move to stabilize her. Valor Purchase goes limp, and Valor catches her before she hits the ground, hauling her behind a low hedge to buy a moment of concealment. He checks the visible wounds where armor failed and listens for distant footsteps, keeping the pistol hand free while searching for the fastest way to help. Stealth remains his first priority as he prepares to treat the worst injuries. Hejaz the Whip narrows his eyes at the scene and notes the strange dog corpse that disrupted his advance, the detail sharpening his suspicion. The lieutenant recognizes that someone slipped in unseen, and he sizes up the newcomer standing protectively between him and the fallen knight. Valor maintains angle control, forcing the fight to happen on his terms. Valor lifts a single-shot flintlock with dead calm, the pistol a quiet promise between them. Hejaz flashes a grin and answers with a jeer that calls him a freak, trying to bait a reaction while the whip coils ready in his hand. The alley narrows to a duel of reach and timing. Pistol against whip. Valor warns not to call him bro, the comment clipped, as he keeps his aim steady. Hejaz laughs off the gun, bragging that a whip has a longer effective range if the target hesitates. Both opponents acknowledge the reload disadvantage and shift into the small, dangerous clockwork of one exchange at a time. Hejaz toys with the whip and taunts Valor to aim well, insisting his weapon moves faster than a reloaded bullet. Valor keeps lateral movement available, and the muzzle pointed, counting the fraction of a second he will need. The two of them trade tempo and timing instead of words as the forest holds its breath. Hejaz explodes forward, the whip snapping in a blinding arc toward Valor's head. The newcomer ducks under the lash, rolling his shoulder to deny the full force and snapping back into a fighting stance with weapon ready. The whip's speed forces Valor into constant motion, but he refuses to give the initiative away. Hejaz snarls a challenge and drives the whip to draw Valor into open space, but Valor lunges aggressively into the arc to jam the line and rob the whip of momentum. The two collide at point blank, each trying to seize the inside position while the whip coils and snaps uselessly close to flesh. The whip lashes at Valor's midsection and whistles wide as he sidesteps, the strike grazing nothing but air. Hejaz recovers with a backstep and promises the fight is far from over, voice low with strained pride. Valor keeps pressure up instead of pausing, unwilling to let the lieutenant recover his range advantage. Hejaz launches a series of rapid slashes and spins, forcing Valor to sprint a curved path to break line and avoid a decisive lash. Valor's boots dig into the wet earth to hold traction as he cuts across the lieutenant's arcs. Hejaz chases with feral grace, trying to restore the distance his whip needs to dominate. Valor springs upward and points the pistol skyward as Hejaz uses the whip as an anchor to hurl himself into the air. The fight flips vertical, the lieutenant preparing an aerial lash while Valor times a single decisive shot. The world narrows to a crosshair moment between earth and sky. Hejaz taunts about closing distance and rains down another flurry, but Valor slithers under the descending lash with a low serpentine run. He reads the telegraphs at the lieutenant's hips and cuts inside the whip's arc to press the fight into close quarters. The battleground shrinks until blade, pistol, and skin are all that matter. Hejaz's surprise is sharp as he realizes Valor leapt through every expert feint and closed the distance despite top-tier whip skill. Valor drives in with a low center of gravity designed to lock the engagement and deny sweeping strikes. The lieutenant's confidence cracks as the fight enters the realm where instinct and experience decide the outcome. Valor tucks the musket and brings a blade into his offhand, splitting the threat vectors to force blind angles against the whip. Hejaz snarls that he will not go easy, lunging with renewed venom. Valor feints with the muzzle while angling the blade for a close, precise strike that Hejaz cannot easily see. Valor materializes behind the lieutenant with an almost playful flourish and exposes the blade, the sudden appearance stealing the lieutenant's focus. Hejaz's head whips around in shock as the knife finds a critical gap and slides home, a clean strike that compromises balance and perception. The wound is immediate and brutal, forcing Hejaz into desperate recovery. Valor withdraws the blooded blade and resets his stance as Hejaz staggers with the new wound, the whip sagging in his grip. The attacker offers a dry, almost bored question about how that felt, keeping the mood cold and businesslike. The lieutenant's options narrow rapidly as his mobility and sight are compromised. Hejaz covers his face and realizes with growing horror that one eye is lost, the world tilting as blood and dizziness steal his edge. His pride as a melee specialist turns to stunned calculation as he struggles to find purchase on new, unreliable vision. The injury makes every attack and defense guesswork now, and retreat becomes the only sensible option. Hejaz grits his teeth and wills time to buy himself recovery, then manifests a pair of monstrous bat wings that tear free from his back. The ground explodes with displaced dirt as the wings unfurl and he lifts, converting his escape options into an aerial vector. Flight opens an exit strategy and the battlefield fractures into sky and ground. Hejaz announces he must go, invoking a busy schedule as he launches skyward to escape the blades and bullets. Valor watches from below and taunts that the lieutenant is chickening out, voice flat and unshaken. The engagement shifts to anti-air as Valor prepares for a shot at a moving target. Hejaz floats above and warns that taunts will not sway him, claiming he only fights battles he can win, and that today he plays a ranged role. Valor holds the musket level, adjusting for distance and wind, while his other hand keeps a blade ready. The two measure the odds. One wants to run, the other wants to finish the job before escape becomes permanent. Hejaz laughs at the idea of a mid-air bullet, and reaches for bravado as he misjudges the distance. Valor calls the shot and pulls the trigger, the single musket round finding center mass and detonating the fight into a single decisive hit. Blood stains the lieutenant's side as he loses control of the wings mid-flap. The flintlock hisses as spent powder smoke curls from the barrel and Valor watches the lieutenant convulse with the impact. Hijaz's aerial control collapses and the wings falter, sending him plunging toward the ground. Valor lets himself savor the practical satisfaction of a perfect shot, then prepares for the landing and loot. Hijaz slams into the earth with a final, graceless crash and folds like broken canvas as Valor walks forward through the scattering market stalls. The lieutenant's wings crumple, and the whip lies useless at his side while Valor narrows his gaze on the fallen. The market whispers around them as the fight ends and the victor counts spoils. Valor wipes the blade clean and lets the knife's edge glint under the moon while Hijaz trembles, voice whimpering and asking if this is the end. Valor's tone stays clinical as he moves to inventory the lieutenant's possessions, intent on extracting anything useful rather than indulging mercy. The defeated man becomes a list of items to be secured. Hijaz breaks down in desperate sobs and attempts to plead for his life, but Valor's face goes hard and predatory, cutting the plea off as worthless theater. He warns him to stop the act and accept the consequence, coldly confirming the intention to take what he needs. The lieutenant goes silent, the bargaining table closed by injury and defeat. A system notice confirms the kill of Pezimut's lieutenant Hijaz the Whip, and the blue loot panel unfurls over the scene. The drop list appears. Hijaz's cloak, Hijaz's whip, a magic binding rope, a physical enhancement potion, venom from the poison dragon Herguma, an antidote to that venom, and 2,000 florins. Valor secures the items with practiced hands while the system records the achievement. Valor crouches between the fallen lieutenant and Dame Valpurgis and pulls a green vial from his pack, thankful he did not sell it earlier. He tells himself there is no time to waste and prepares to apply the potion directly to the wound as the tooltip flashes healing potion used. He readies the treatment and calls Valpurgis's name as he moves to administer it. Valor kneels and inspects the dents and ruptured seals in Valpurgis's plate harness, mapping the access points he will need to reach the wounds. He steadies his breathing and imagines the rapid, awkward medical procedure ahead, knowing the potion must touch skin to work. The night lies still and silent as he prepares to do what must be done. The potion's tooltip confirms a full cure, but warns the healer to apply it directly to the injured area, a constraint that turns treatment into an invasive task. Valor whispers Valpurgis's name and accepts that the whole dose will be needed to restore her. He steels himself for the procedure, resolving to do whatever it takes to save her life. Valor reads the effect in caution again, the words echoing in his head that the potion must touch the wounded area to work. Caution steels him for an awkward and urgent strip of armor, and he calculates the fastest seams and buckles to expose damaged skin without wasting time. The forest hums around them as he readies hands that will move from armor to flesh. Valor's face tightens with concentration as he tells himself to stay clinical, reminding himself this is a medical procedure with no room for impure thoughts. He reaches for the nearest buckle and begins to unfasten sections of the plate harness, exposing the first patch of damaged skin beneath the armor for direct application. Every motion is efficient and purposeful as he fights both time and protocol. Valor forces himself to focus, fingers trembling as he maneuvers the vial toward the first wound and commands his nerves to steady. The scene shifts as a caption reveals his real name, Jaewoo, and a new thread opens into his past. Memories surface of a childhood scarred by loss, setting the next beat of his life between survival and sacrifice. The flashback shows his father gone and his mother collapsing from overwork, leaving the young Jaewoo to shoulder the household at 18. Those early losses hardened him into someone who would not hesitate when money or survival demanded blunt, practical action. The city around him in memory becomes the training ground for the ruthless pragmatism he now uses in both worlds. Young Jaewoo learns to collect favors and enforce deals, walking into a cramped bathroom to confront a thug who complains about being set up. He presses the point with the practiced calm of someone who survived by settling accounts for others. The memory frames his present motive, making enough to survive and protect those who depend on him. In the present, Jaewoo takes payment with the same unromantic efficiency he learned as a teenager, counting bills while keeping his face neutral. The caption marks him as a problem resolver in Hanam-dong at 22, a job that pays quick cash for blunt solutions. The exchange completes, the money confirmed, and the workday grinds on. Jaewoo warns that the temporary cash advance is not a long-term fix and urges the associate to pay off the debt when he can. The grateful man claims he will hit a huge score on a quest this week and promises 10 million won, his voice overly eager to sell the idea. Jaewoo's patience thins, and the man's nervous grin does little to convince him of miracles. The associate launches into a pitch about a new immersive single-player RPG called Humanity's Guardian, insisting the payoffs are real and the player base enormous. He gestures at an imagined world with global reach and lavish character design while boasting about astronomical player numbers and earning potential. Jaewoo listens with skeptical amusement, unconvinced but curious about the practical angle. The associate paints a cinematic fantasy full of heroic vistas and polished character art, throwing in the promise of beauty and freedom to stoke excitement. He even shouts a wild claim of 1 billion players as if numbers alone make a fortune. The sales pitch tempts a practical man who only cares about returns, and Jaewoo's curiosity begins to prick at him. The associate emphasizes that top rankers rake in tens of millions of won, backing the claim with a visual fantasy of money cascading over skyscrapers. He says the quest he is heading to could net huge returns and invites Jaewoo to try his luck. The practical question of whether the game can feed a real life hangs between them as an opportunity or a gamble. Jaewoo tells them he is busy today and reaches for his phone, scrolling through the usual requests. A sudden message arrives canceling the job he expected to take, freeing his schedule without effort. He blinks at the unexpected opening and a small grin of possibility crosses his face. With nothing tying him down, Jaewoo taps the login and watches the interface dissolve into a cascade of blue rectangles. The system confirms logging into the game, and reality peels away as the connection. Sethak takes hold. He steps through the interface into a world built to look and feel startlingly real. Jaewoo spawns into a sunlit market town where the sky looks startlingly real, and the stones underfoot carry the ordinary weight of life. He marvels that modern technology can render clouds and light with such fidelity as he wanders the crowded plaza. Vendors shout, children run, and the whole scene hums with convincing textured detail. As he moves through the market, Jaewoo questions if this is really a game while watching a vendor toss apples with practiced fingers. One stall catches his eye for the unabashed color and apparent freshness of the fruit, and he leans in until the apples look almost touchable. The realism nags at him as both a marvel and an economy to be navigated. Jaewoo is taken by the minute realism and admits to himself that even skin pores are rendered with uncanny detail. The vendor's hand clamps on him, and a brusque question about payment snaps the moment back to market reality. Jaewoo realizes he must produce currency on the spot and mutters an embarrassed "oh crap." The vendor barks that those without coin should get out of the way, and a blue UI panel floats up to reveal Jaewoo's current balance of 10 florins. He recognizes the florin as the local currency and resolves to be cautious with the small sum, knowing a single florin might matter more than it looks. A small boy stares at the apples with hungry eyes, and Jaewoo's instincts shift from hoarding to human. The mother pulls her son, but he cannot tear his eyes from the fruit, clinging to longing while the market buzzes around them. Jaewoo steps forward and asks the vendor how much for a single apple, measuring the moment like a transaction and a small mercy. The vendor answers 1 florin, and the child's face lights with sudden amazed hope. Jaewoo takes a florin and hands the shining apple to the boy, who receives it as if it were treasure, eyes wide with delight. The mother thanks him profusely, and Jaewoo shrugs it off, telling himself it is only game money, even as the scene warms him. The boy runs back to his mother, declaring the fruit delicious, and the pair wave as they leave. Jaewoo allows himself a rueful smile, thinking that 1 florin in this world can buy a full day's meal, and that small kindness means more than the number on a screen. He waves the family on and calls to the boy to listen to his mother, the voice softer than his usual bluntness. The small exchange pulls a memory free of being a selfish brat when he once lived alone with his mother, and the recollection settles him as he continues through the market. Jaewoo remembers begging for fried chicken as a child while watching a mother give a small treasure to her son at the market, and the memory loosens something in him as he admits the game is really charming. After that, Jaewoo starts visiting humanity's guardian more often, using the game as a refuge whenever life grows stressful. Helping people in the real world and receiving a grateful nod from an elderly villager becomes the prelude to logging into Savior of Humanity, where quest confirmations fill Jaewoo with a steadier kind of purpose, and he begins to log in more and more to let the game carry his stress. Jaewoo alternates between running from trouble in the streets and recharging by fighting massive in-game threats like a fire, breathing dragon, and he always returns to real life a little more worn out but a little more whole. 5 years of game time have passed, and Dame Valpurgis approaches Jaewoo in Hovel Forest, introduces herself as Valpurgis, and asks if he is skilled before requesting help with a rampaging wild boar. Jaewoo plays it cool when Valpurgis mentions the wild boar, jokes about having it for dinner, she taunts his bravado, and the hunt begins as a huge boar charges toward them. The boar falls from Jaewoo's strike. Valpurgis praises his power and confesses she could not intervene, then proposes they team up while he considers the offer in silence. A party request from the nun knight Valpurgis appears in the interface. Jaewoo grumbles that it feels like being bossed around, and Valpurgis shoots back a teasing question about chronic trust issues. Valpurgis deems him interesting and offers to recommend him as a knight of the empire if he accepts the party, and Jaewoo agrees to the deal. A crowd below chants Jaewoo as he stands on a grand balcony, and Valpurgis greets him while the host remarks on how far he has come and asks how he feels about the sudden recognition. A dignitary addresses him as Steel Elector. Jaewoo admits the achievement does not feel like his alone, and acknowledges Valpurgis for setting him on this path, and another voice brushes off his modesty. Valpurgis gestures toward the plaza and declares the gathered people the ones Jaewoo saved, calling the scene the peace he created as doves flutter through the air. She repeats that those citizens are his people, as the crowd continues to cheer below, reinforcing the weight of the responsibility now placed on him. Riding side by side through the woods, Valpurgis praises Valor's abilities, and their partnership deepens with each mile they travel together. Valpurgis confesses she has never met anyone as committed as Jaewoo, and asks his motive, and he answers plainly that he truly loves this world. Valpurgis laughs at his answer while Jaewoo mentions his face still hurts from earlier, and when she asks why he removed his armor, he explains he had no choice given the circumstances. Valpurgis plans to return to the convent to report that he is alive and promises to repay him. Jaewoo idly imagines a favor in return, and she teases him for being a perv. They continue toward the convent as the landscape closes around them, and a caption marks their destination as Valpurgis Convent. At the convent gate, Valpurgis protests that Jaewoo is a VIP, but Vice Abbess Angela stands firm and invokes emergency protocol, announcing that Valorstred Valor is not allowed entry. Valpurgis repeats his VIP argument to the assembled convent leaders, but Angela remains unmoved and reiterates that no exception can be made under the current emergency protocol. Angela restates the emergency protocol and makes it clear that the convent must remain closed to him, underscoring how serious the internal crisis has become. At an inn near Leinfelden, Jaewoo lies awake thinking that he had intended to request the Heart of the Angel from the convent, because its resurrection power is what he needs for what is coming. The heart of the angel is shown as a golden relic with a bright blue core and described as a sacred item passed down through the Valperga convent for centuries. The narration explains the heart of the angel is an S-rank artifact brimming with divine blessing that can call a soul back to life, in other words, granting one extra life. Jaewoo admits he desperately needs the artifact, and Valpurgis arrives, apologizing that such a valued guest must stay in humble accommodations, while she prepares to discuss the convent's crisis. Valpurgis finds Jaewoo deep in thought, warns that what she must reveal is serious and confidential. He swears to keep the secret for life, and she answers that she trusts him. Valpurgis reveals that the High Abbess has succumbed to the darkness. Jaewoo notes he spoke with Vice Abbess Angela only moments earlier, and Valpurgis points out that such a contradiction suggests a traitor within the convent. Jaewoo clarifies that Margareta is the current High Abbess, and Valpurgis immediately suspects the Demon King Pezamut's influence in whatever corruption has taken hold. Jaewoo reels at the revelation that Margareta is alive and possibly compromised, and Valpurgis notices his shock and asks if he is alright. Jaewoo runs through Margareta's record as the Empire's most overwhelming warrior, who militarized the Valperga convent, and concludes there is no world in which they can afford to lose her. Jaewoo leaps up and demands confirmation that the High Abbess was attacked by the darkness, and Valpurgis confirms that is correct. Insisting they must act at once, Jaewoo claims deep knowledge of the darkness, and the pair ride through heavy rain toward the Valperga convent headquarters. Within the convent's inner halls, a senior questions Jaewoo's claim to know the darkness, while Valpurgis stands firm, vouching that he is someone they can trust, and urging the leadership to place faith in him once. They enter Angela's candlelit office, where the Vice Abbess remarks that Valpurgis has already revealed a great deal to Jaewoo, and the tension in the room becomes palpable as the briefing begins. Angela steps forward and sharply reminds them that the incident arose from a traitor within their ranks, questioning Valpurgis for proposing they trust an outsider in such. Angela orders the meeting ended and tells the others to leave, cutting off Valpurgis's protest, while Jaewoo remains quiet and reads the room, looking for another way to help. When Angela insists an outsider should not interfere, Jaewoo asks to be heard, surprising the council by claiming he has read the 7 sacred scriptures and knows resistant methods worth considering. Angela reacts with disbelief that Jaewoo has read the scripture attributed to Saint Antonio, and he explains that the 7 sacred scriptures include every known detail about the darkness, and that the volume, Death and Struggle, was sealed away after the Grand Army of Darkness. Angela demands to know how he came by such forbidden knowledge. Jaewoo warns that even naming the darkness invites curse, yet pleads for trust, and asserts he knows every method of resisting it. Angela concedes and places a condition on his involvement, requiring Jaewoo to swear never to speak of what he has learned for the rest of his life, with a clear threat if he breaks that oath. She slams the desk to underscore the convent's severity and warns that anyone who breathes a word of the secret will be buried in the Line River. A procession of heavily trained nuns escorts them through the corridors, and Jaewoo notes the intimidating grip strength of the order and the overpowering scent of sweat that speaks to relentless physical training. A towering, masked sister with a glowing eye passes close by. Valpurgis says Jaewoo looks pale. He steadies himself by saying the goddess protects him, and the system confirms he is mentally protected from the darkness. They arrive at a sealed double door leaking purple miasma, and Angela warns that the contamination is overwhelming, instructing them to stay focused or risk losing themselves to the darkness. Jaewoo acknowledges Angela's warning, and she orders the escort to remain outside while only she, Jaewoo, and Valpurgis proceed into the contaminated chamber. Angela opens the sealed door, and a pulse of dark energy surges out, forcing Jaewoo to stumble as the interface registers that he is taking mental damage from the darkness. Valpurgis checks Jaewoo. He steadies himself by invoking the goddess's protection as the system notes his mental safeguard, and Angela announces that the figure before them is the High Abbess. Jaewoo stares in disbelief at the bound figure, and recognizes the person as Margareta, the convent's legendary High Abbess, seeing her young, unconscious form entangled by the darkness. They identify the captive as Margareta. A murmured suggestion of kidnapping is denied as Angela corrects them. Jaewoo makes a strange joke about the earlier displays of strength, and Angela insists he take the matter seriously. With her voice breaking, Angela admits they would not be asking a mercenary unless truly desperate, and explains the convent exhausted countless approaches before turning to Jaewoo's knowledge against the darkness. Valor leans over the High Abbess and sees the dark corruption clinging to her like a living stain. Angela grabs his cloak, desperate and shaking, begging him to save Margareta. Valor staggers from the force of the request as his system notice reports damage to him. The room holds only the afflicted abbess in urgent fear. Angela lets go and apologizes, as Valor gasps for air and composes himself. He inspects Margareta and realizes how critical her condition has become. The rate of corruption and the way sacred wounds react tell him this is no ordinary affliction. Angela watches him, hope and fear mixed in her posture. Valor traces the black veins crawling up the High Abbess's neck, and registers the infection's depth. He forces himself to a plan, and tells Angela there is still a way. Angela seizes his collar again, frantic for details, and the convent's tension spikes, as the magic system flags damage to Valor once more. Angela steadies herself and announces a solution without hesitation. Valor listens, the weight of what they must attempt settling over him. Margareta remains unconscious, the darkness still present, and every second counts as the small group prepares for a desperate ritual that could change everything. Angela instructs them to use the convent's relic on the High Abbess and makes clear what she means. Dame Valpurgis stands ready in full armor, the relic's importance obvious from the way the sisters react. The heart of the angel is named as their only chance to face the darkness lodged in Margareta. Angela repeats the directive to place the convent relic on Margareta, and waits for Valor's consent. Everyone falls silent as the gravity of what she asks becomes clear. Walpurgis watches the mercenary for his decision, the heart of the angel poised to be the instrument of a ritual. None of them take lightly. Angela clarifies that the relic she means is the heart of the angel, and that their plan is to extract the curse afflicting the High Abbess. She inspects Margaretta's features, confirming sacred corruption is the source of the malady, and prepares the convent for the dangerous transfer they must attempt. Angela explains the method: transfer the darkness into a new vessel and seal it away. She warns that divine power and curses repel one another, and that the transfer will almost certainly kill the High Abbess. Valor steps forward and offers himself as the vessel, the only non-cleric present who might survive the curse's initial host. Valor presents himself as the perfect vessel and tries to make the choice sound easy, testing their reactions. Angela hesitates and then warns that the plan may not work. She reveals that Margaretta left a message, a sacred directive that complicates Valor's offer and forces them to weigh duty against desperate necessity. Angela recounts Margaretta's words: the darkness is hers to bear, and no one else should die in her place because the Empire cannot risk losing what she protects. The curse was born of darkness itself and carries consequences that reach beyond the convent, making the decision heavier than anyone expected. Angela warns that the curse's cause and symptoms remain unknown, and that it is an enigma wrapped in shadow. She asks if Valor truly believes he can survive it, stressing that the curse will haunt anyone who carries it. The convent's fear is palpable as they realize how little they truly understand. Walpurgis pleads with Valor not to sacrifice himself, her fear obvious in every word. He assures her he will be fine, and turns to Angela with steady confidence, claiming to be the best candidate. His calm masks the strategy and knowledge he plans to use if they proceed. Valor reveals he knows the darkness from the Great Holy War, and that he is not a cleric, so the curse may not hit him the same way. He produces a chained scripture, a fragment of death and struggle, and argues that as an outsider, he is the ideal pawn to draw the darkness away without destroying the convent's clergy. Angela rubs her forehead and admits the obvious truth. If Margaretta wakes, she will be furious at the risk they took, but the choice was forced. Walpurgis calls them back to action, awareness of the abbess's temperament and the convent's fragile situation pushing them to decide quickly. Angela grants Valor permission to act as he sees fit and places the heart of the angel before him on a cushion. The relic's tooltip appears, describing its power to revive a soul once upon death, and the ritual begins in earnest as everyone braces for the cost. Valor weighs the timing and admits this might be his only chance to gain an ally in Margaretta. Walpurgis nervously questions the plan, but Angela dismisses overprotection and lets him make his choice, reminding the group that he volunteered and must bear the outcome. Preparations complete, Valor places the relic against Margaretta's forehead and begins the ritual. Blue, glyph, like particles spring to life around them as the activation sequence starts. Darkness in the abbess reacts, and the transfer link between them begins to form as the ceremony unfolds. The ritual intensifies, and purple-black curse energy funnels through Valor's hands and into his body. System glyphs stream like a cold rain as Angela cries out in alarm at the way the darkness presses against them. The transfer link stabilizes, but the flow is violent and dangerous. Dame Walpurgis braces for the storm of magic as the chamber fills with turbulent particle effects. The darkness continues to pour into Valor even as Margaretta lies motionless, the ritual drawing power from a place no one fully understands. The room rattles with supernatural force. Valor's consciousness is pulled into a vast star-filled void as the transfer completes in part. He finds himself standing on a small rocky sphere beneath nebulae and planets, the ritual linked to the convent of faint tether. The realm feels wrong and endless, a place carved from darkness itself. Valor looks out across the pitch, black expanse, and wonders if he has entered the realm of darkness. A disembodied voice answers, introducing itself as the one who crouches in the grave, the king of gravekeepers. The entity's presence settles over the void like a verdict, and demands to know who summoned it. Valor shouts his name and orders the darkness to lift the curse from Margaretta. The cosmic entity sneers at the mortal shouting into its realm, noting that Valor's shell is already gone because of the ritual. The void presses in, a titan's test of the man offering himself as vessel. The one who crouches in the grave refuses the petitioner and manifests a colossal violet eye overhead. Lightning and expulsion force sweep toward Valor as the entity orders him from its sight. The pressure of that gaze threatens to cast him out of the void completely. A system prompt flashes. The player's soul is protected. The Gravekeeper recoils in visible shock at Valor's immunity to soul extraction and tries again, only to find the safeguard holding. Valor stumbles as the entity tests the boundary between worlds and finds the mechanism he carries prevents outright theft of his soul. Valor snaps and demands the curse be broken and passed on to him. The entity answers with a brutal choice: reveal oneself or suffer the souls of all nearby being torn out. The threat raises the stakes, threatening collateral spiritual slaughter if Valor refuses to bargain honestly. Valor pivots to provocation and claims knowledge of the 7 sacred scriptures, then tells the entity he bartered with the sealed text, death in struggle. The Gravekeeper reacts with raw fury at the mention, and Valor presses the insult further, baiting the cosmic being into a negotiation he can use to his advantage. The Gravekeeper calls the sealed text a crass beast, and Valor mockingly suggests that it sells copies to sages. The taunt needles the entity and forces it to react, proving Valor's strategy to trade information and bait for a bargain is working, as the darkness shifts from contempt to negotiation. The Gravekeeper finally concedes and agrees to grant Valor's request, but it demands conditions in return. Valor allows himself a private smile, knowing he played the entity into talk. Both parties brace as the terms begin to form, the price for handling a cosmic curse about to be revealed. A system quest appears in the void, offering a new objective: eliminate the Demon Lord sponsored by Death and Struggle. The targets appear on the display with ranks and names, giving Valor a list that ties his bargain directly to tangible tasks. Kolak, Farza, Hertzamok, and Amor, each a major Demon Lord. Valor watches the list and feels the bait already taking hold, Demon Lords beginning to stir. The Gravekeeper, irritated, throws a shard of darkness at Valor as proof of the pact. The energy begins to return through the tether, flowing back toward Valor's body in the ritual's final stages. Darkness surges into Valor and he convulses, the transfer load spiking dangerously as the entity reminds him that nothing comes free. The Gravekeeper stresses that power of this scale demands an equal price, and Valor feels the ritual's lethal edge close in on him as the energy overloads his form. Valor screams as the darkness pounds at his spirit and body, the ritual pushing him to a brink he cannot resist. He endures soul, rending pain and system updates, stream unseen. The Holy Relic and the Gravekeeper's terms completing the sequence despite the risk of death in the real world. System notifications cascade. Valor acquires a new class titled One Without Blood or Tears, gains major stat boosts, unlocks a darkness stat and learns an S rank skill to summon undead. The final notice appears with cold finality: you died. The ritual's price has been paid, and the mechanism for resurrection via the heart of the angel begins. Light pours into the convent and Valor jerks upright in Dame Valpurgis's bed, breath ragged, as if he's been pulled back from a long night. He checks his hand and finds the heart of the angel ring still on his finger, the relic having completed its resurrection clause and returned him to life in the convent's care. Valor confirms the relic's presence and lets out a shaky laugh of relief, rubbing his head as if waking from a fevered dream. For a moment a darker hue touches his gaze, a residue of the darkness now lodged in him. But he smooths it away and meets the morning with an odd, nervous grin. An image of the class's potential flashes through Valor's mind: a king of necromancers commanding legions of leeches, undead, and bone dragons. This is the power called One Without Blood or Tears, the apex of necromancy he just unlocked, and the dark destiny that now marks him from the inside out. Back in the convent, Valor stands tall and proclaiming himself the very first to earn this necromancer apex, feeling the world's eyes on him even if only in his imagination. He basks for a moment in that absurd triumph, and then steels himself, knowing the bargain and the tasks now bound to his name. Dame Valpurgis bursts into the room, frantic and relieved, demanding whether Valor really hit his head. Valor stammers denials and tries to appear composed. She follows with a scolding that barely masks how worried she was while he lay unconscious and how relieved she is to find him alive. Angela explains she carried Valor to Dame Valpurgis's quarters after the ritual ended and he lost consciousness. Valor murmurs thanks, embarrassed and repentant. Angela scolds him fiercely and pleads with him not to be so reckless again, the convent's care and the cost he paid weighing on both of them. Valor apologizes earnestly to Dame Valpurgis, promising he will not do such a thing again. He steadies himself in the chair while her armored hand rests near him as if to make sure he truly recovered. Morning light moves across the room, ordinary and serene, despite the night's extraordinary events. They sit together by the window in a long silence that finally breaks with Valor's promise. Valpurgis repeats it, holding him to his word, and then neither speaks for a long moment as both of them watch the light and think of what was lost and what was gained at such a price. A heavy vibration shakes the convent, and both of them snap to attention. Valpurgis asks if they are under attack and a distant sister answers nervously that nothing like that has occurred. The pair exchange a look and move out into the halls to investigate the source of the tremor. Valor, Dame Valpurgis, Angela, and several sisters hurry outside to a clearing where the forest has been devastated, tree trunks reduced to stumps as if something with immense force passed through. Angela sees Valor and acknowledges him, and the group takes in the evidence of raw power laid down among the ruined trees. A colossal trunk crashes a sigh, and the group flinches as dust and splinters explode into the air. Valor ducks instinctively, and then looks up as a bright voice rings out, calling to them that someone is awake. They move toward the impact site, wary and curious at the source of such destructive energy. To everyone's astonishment, Margareta stands in the ruined clearing, smiling and energetic, and explains she was only doing a light warm-up after lying down for so long. Valor and the sisters stare in stunned amusement, as the abbess's youthful vigor explains away what looked like an act of devastation. Margareta proclaims herself the High Abbess of Valparga Convent, and in the same breath demonstrates inhuman strength by hurling a massive tree trunk aside. The trunk arcs through the sky and explodes into the distance, proving she has recovered from the darkness, and now wields terrifying power on a scale none of them expected. Margareta calls herself Mari, with a wink and a grin. Cheerful and disarming after the violence she just displayed. Her golden eyes shine, and her energy is infectious, leaving Valpurgis and Angela equal parts relieved that she's recovered and stunned at the sheer force she now commands. They descend the convent's inner stone staircase together, Margareta lively at Valor's side as they move into the halls for debrief and inspection. The world outside will feel the effects of what just happened, and now the convent must reckon with a high abbess restored and a mercenary marked by darkness. Valor thinks of Philip, assuming the prince has already left the deep forest. He reflects that acquiring the cold-blooded one rank changes his options, but that without the heart of the angel his odds of secretly killing a guardian like Philip remain low. The new power is real, but so are its limits. Margareta runs ahead calling it time for an adventure, and the convent's mood lightens instantly. Angela sighs and asks for decency, only to be teased by the abbess who declares decency the true evil of noble societies. Valor trails behind them, alert and watchful even as laughter breaks through the morning air. Margareta's cheer fills the corridor as she teases Angela and Valpurgis, turning stiff formality into something lighter. Her golden eyes shine with mischief, and the convent's older faces relax at the unexpected warmth. Valor watches, noting how a child can hold so much strength and command while the knight in silver remains composed beside him. Margareta's playful approach draws a shy smile from Valor, who tries to match her warmth. The abbess's unguarded expression softens the moment, and Valor feels the brief relief of companionship as they move through the convent together. They descend into Valpurga's forbidden cache and find a room crowded with cursed artifacts and forbidden tools. Margareta brightens at the sight of strange relics, while Valor catalogs their potential, recognizing this trove as perfect ground for his darkness-touched equipment and plans. Margareta's dramatic affection turns the inspection into a charming scene, her teasing breaking any remaining stiffness. Even the convent's mascot image of her extreme devotion becomes a private joke, and the group lets their guard drop for a moment before the real work begins. Margareta hurries them forward, almost dragging Valor toward the next chamber. The convent's orderly procession dissolves into a rush of curiosity as the heavy doors swing open to reveal deeper storage and darker possibilities. Valor takes a steadying breath and readies himself, mentally marking this moment as the start of the Philip hunt. Everything to this point feels like preparation, and now he intends to accelerate the plan he has kept simmering. Morning light finds Valor assessing what he has gained underground. He secures the Cursed One equipment and recognizes how its curse negating property and shadow explosion ability change his tactical options, giving him the edge he needs in cursed spaces. Valor dons the magic dagger of Monster Karka and feels its affinity for the undead strengthen his necromancy. The dagger is a clear boost to his undead skills, and he moves with the confidence of one who can now shape summoning into a practical weapon. Valpurgis steps forward and asks for one last walk, an intimate request masked as a courtesy. Valor accepts, aware of the unspoken trust in the offer and the pendant that lingers at the edge of their exchange. Their steps fall into a comfortable rhythm as Valpurgis recalls battles where Valor's help proved decisive. Memories of orc skirmishes and the final showdown with Hexax highlight the bond forged in danger, and Valor receives her gratitude without overt ceremony. Valor's easy grin falters under Valpurgis's steady gaze, and he stumbles through polite answers. Her interest is quiet but insistent, and he senses this walk is more than a farewell of manners. Valpurgis hints at something hidden beneath her helm, then draws back, letting the question hang between them. Valor's curiosity spikes, but he respects the restraint she keeps around that secret. Valpurgis admits the mark beneath her helmet is a large scar tied to a curse, a family secret her uncle tried desperately to hide. Valor listens as she lays out the loneliness that nickname and secrecy brought, understanding this is why she keeps her face shielded. She explains that the ugly knight slur came from ignorance and cruelty, not truth, and then asks Valor if he will look at her without armor. The request carries risk, and Valor recognizes the trust she places in him by simply asking. Valpurgis confesses her nerves, and that she feels safer revealing herself to Valor. The moment tightens around them, leaves drifting down as if to shield the quiet exchange and seal the promise of candid honesty between them. When she finally lifts the helm, golden hair and blue eyes are revealed, and she vulnerably asks if he finds her ugly. The armor's formality melts into a personal plea, and Valor faces the real person rather than a title. Valor's startled silence gives way to an earnest compliment as he scrambles for words, and Valpurgis's tension breaks into visible relief. The exchange shifts their relationship from duty towards something closer to mutual care. Seeing her unguarded face leaves Valor unexpectedly moved, and for the first time he treats Valpurgis as an equal rather than as a mystery. She says she has a token to give, a gesture that deepens the trust between them. Valpurgis offers a House of Byron pendant handed down by her uncle as a token, to symbolize she will always be with Valor. He accepts the weight of that promise, and recognizes the political and personal significance of her gesture. Valor cradles the pendant, and vows to keep it close, understanding how such a simple object anchors a promise. Valpurgis stands steadied by his response, the token transforming into tangible reassurance for both of them. Their departure devolves into comic politeness, as Margareta insists Valor go first, and Valor insists she go first, creating a light, human moment. The small debate dissolves into laughter, and a proper parting as Valor leaves to pursue his next objective. The childish insistence on courtesy finally ends, and as they part, the world subtly acknowledges that Valpurgis's trust opened narrative doors. Valor heads into the night, knowing the stakes are now personal as well as strategic. Night settles over the trees, and Valor allows a brief, private smile at the absurdity of romance routes and tokens. The humor is thin cover for a deeper resolve, and he steels himself for the hunt to come as the forest swallows the path ahead. Riding into the aftermath, Valor registers the fallen and the scattered chaos, an ugly tableau that tells of fierce combat. He steels himself when the scent of blood and the sight of abandoned weapons confirm the scale of what transpired here. Valor studies the battlefield and deduces which duel played out here, noting signs that Philip and his ally fought like men on the edge. When he picks up a discarded sword, the weight of the fight and the enemy's skill become immediate and personal. He orders a thorough search of the area and rides on with intent, the magic dagger's presence at his side reminding him he can shape the dead into scouts if he needs. The air chills as he commits to tracking Philip through whatever remains of the night. Valor's expression tightens into a satisfied plan as he channels darkness through the dagger. Then necromantic energy coils and answers to his will, and he prepares to activate a summoning that will expand his reach across the ruins. His summon manifests as a clutch of vampire minions, figures formed from blood and obedience. Valor assigns them a single clear mission to scour the battlefield and track the prince, turning necromancy into reconnaissance and leverage. Valor directs his newly raised servants to gather the scattered military uniforms and search the perimeter. A plan of deception forming in his mind as uniforms collected here will let him infiltrate or mislead the elector's forces. Everything collected here will come in handy as tools of disguise and misdirection, assets to be deployed when the moment demands concealment, and a safe aid of authority. Philip and his remaining men are raw from battle, breath steaming in the cold while blame and frustration stitch through their ranks. Valor watches from the shadows and measures how the elector's pride might be turned into a tactical weakness. Philip's officers urge caution, but he refuses to be cowed, calling out into the night when a single cloaked figure appears on the ruined street. The encounter tightens into a dangerous, focused confrontation. Valor steps forward and claims the identity of the mercenary Philip remembers, forcing recognition and disrupting any complacency Philip may have had. The name lands like a gauntlet thrown down in the mud. Philip explodes in fury at his subordinates for failing him, a storm of arrogance and wounded pride. Valor notes how that fury reveals both strength and brittle overconfidence, and he prepares accordingly. Philip degrades the surviving troops, threatening demotion and punishment while the men shrink under his words. Valor watches the spectacle of command eroding into cruelty, understanding how loyalty can be fractured by hubris. A panting subordinate crawls toward Valor begging for mercy or aid, and Valor's summoned retinue frames the moment with a terrifying authority. Reinforcements arrive to complicate Philip's calculations, and the balance of force shifts imperceptibly to Valor's favor. Philip clasps hands with his arriving men, promising rewards to secure loyalty, while Valor demurs and keeps his own motives private. The two leaders now circle each other like predators, each marshalling different kinds of power. Philip launches a furious assault, born of wounded pride, but Valor meets that rush with controlled force and the support of his undead. The street becomes a place where personal vendettas and supernatural strategy collide. Valpurga's underground storage contains countless cursed artifacts forbidden by the church, a cache perfectly suited for Valor's darkness affinity, and plans to arm himself with dangerous, unconventional tools. Valor's amusement is thinly masked as he steps into the storm of steel and blood, telling himself he no longer needs the prince's favor. Philip answers with scorn, primed to strike as the contest of counters and curses intensifies. Opening curly bracket, quote, closing curly bracket. Opening curly bracket, quote, closing curly bracket. Valor mocks Philip's self-importance with a cutting comparison, deliberately goading the elector into reaction. The taunt lands and Philip's composure fractures, revealing the quick temper Valor intends to exploit. Philip lifts his blade in a sweeping arc, a single decisive motion that declares he will not be mocked without consequence. The strike cuts through the night, an opening gambit that tests both timing and nerve. Philip reveals the Moonshadow sword style's first form, the crescent slash, and the technique cleaves through the scene with practiced grace. Valor absorbs the motion and notes that the elegance hides a lethal counterposture. The steel elector's counters tear through bodies and summon minions alike, and Valor recognizes the futility of trying to overwhelm a countermaster with mindless waves. To waste mana in brute force here would be to hand Philip the victory he seeks. Valor calls his followers to withdraw and conserve their strength, refusing to be baited into reckless expenditure. Philip's taunt only sharpens Valor's resolve to fight on terms that favor cunning and resource management, rather than heroic bravado. Valor moves in with controlled intent, each motion economized to preserve mana and exploit openings. Philip boasts of his own conviction, but the duel has become a test of whose technique and restraint will break first. 0. They collide in a whirlwind of steel and shattered stone, both men driving with everything they have. The clash sends shockwaves through the ruined square, and Valor relishes the chance to measure his dark craft against the elector's blade. Philip's impact is brutal and bone-shattering, but Valor's evasions and timing keep him from being driven into defeat. The elector's power is undeniable, yet Valor's discipline turns each crushing blow into information about timing and cadence. Philip's rapid, elegant strikes embody the Moonshadow style, a form Valor once admired for its beauty and now fears for its deadly counterattacks. He recognizes that beneath the grace lies a technique built to punish assumptions about opening and momentum. As the knight names Philip the Steel Elector and Master of Counters, Valor squares himself for the lethal exchange to come. The question hangs whether Valor's darkness and tactical cunning can overcome a blade whose very essence is to negate openings and return punishment with terrifying precision. Valor smirks and brags, "Ha! Turns out I'm pretty close with the sisters from the convent." Philip steadies his sword and answers coolly, "Oh, so you've got people backing you up, huh?" Both ready their weapons, and the duel resumes, the ruined square watching silently. Prince Elector Philip raises his blade, invoking Moonshadow sword style, second form 3 harmonies, the moon emblem flaring above him. He plants both hands on the hilt and channels the form into a poised strike, Valor bracing to meet the rhythm and timing of the counterattack. Philip moves with 3 harmonies footwork, each step a precise beat of the style. Valor lunges with his A-rank magic dagger of Monster Karka at a calculated flank, their steps answering one another in a staccato dance with no decisive hit yet. Philip winces at the memory of the internal injuries he has been carrying as Valor cuts through the noise. "This sappy drama ends now, Philip." He surges to press the tempo, forcing Philip's guard to falter under the sudden, brutal advance. Philip staggers back, blood at his lips and breath ragged, while Valor closes the gap without hesitation. "Sorry, but it's not the convent you should be afraid of. It's me," he declares, taking control of the duel's tempo and forcing the Elector onto the defensive. Philip collapses to his knees, clutching his side and protesting that if his strength were whole, he would crush Valor, then begging, why are you trying to kill me? I admired your talent and granted you favor. Valor remains unmoved, the offer of loyalty lost in the space between them. Valor's cold eyes lock on the Elector as he lays out the charges without mercy. First, Philip ignored warnings and was betrayed for it. Second, he abandoned Valpurgis after she worked for him. Each accusation lands like a measured strike, building a case in the ruined square. Valor presses closer and asks sharply, Third, how many people died because of you? Darkness flares around him as the final accusation slams into Philip, leaving the Elector weak and struggling to stand under the weight of what he has caused. Philip begs for mercy, insisting everything he did was for the people, and asking who will protect them if he dies. He warns that his absence would invite the other electorates to seize what he defends, trying to barter life for the fragile stability he claims to represent. Valor narrows his eyes, then offers a chance, producing a violet vial and presenting it like a gamble. This is a full healing potion. If you accept my terms, you may use it. Philip scrambles at the offer, desperation making him promise to agree to anything. Valor leans in, the vial glowing like a trap, and lays out the humiliating condition. Get down on your knees and beg Valpurgis for forgiveness, properly, hands and knees. Philip stammers that she is alive and, trembling, prepares to comply for the sake of survival. Philip scrambles to add an apology, and even offers the House of Bayern 10,000 florins as restitution to secure the potion. Valor watches the flurry of promises, vial uncorked but still controlled between his fingers, keeping the power to grant or deny in his hands. Valor pretends magnanimity, stating he'll let Philip have the whole bottle, and the Elector greedily chugs it down with feverish gratitude. The liquid flares unnaturally as it touches Philip's tongue, a deadly bloom hidden beneath its healing sheen. Philip gags and retches as the vial's contents reveal their true nature. Valor leans close and asks casually, So, how's the taste? Before revealing the truth, it's the venom of the poison dragon, Herguma. Poison takes immediate hold and Philip clutches his throat. Philip spits blood and screams that Valor has mocked him, fury and pain tangle together as the venom eats through him. He struggles to remain upright while rage bubbles into a trembling, helpless accusation at being deceived. Valor twirls the now empty vial and boasts that even demon lords have died from this poison, crowing that he obtained it from Hejaz. Philip, despite the poison, lunges in a final, reckless attempt to strike back, driven by fury and denial. From the shadows, Valor's undead retainer Pippenheim appears, eyes crimson and blade tainted with shadow. He steps through the chaos and with a single, decisive strike, cuts down the Elector, finishing what the poison began and turning the scene into cold finality. Philip's eyes widen in shock as Pippenheim's blade rends flesh, and the square takes a single, terrible breath. Blood splashes across the stone, and the last of the Elector's protests drains away into the ruin of the night. Philip gurgles, Why, you're Pippenheim? Why are you alive? The retainer answers coldly that he was left for dead when the zombie hound attack happened, and that Valor's dread Valor resurrected him through vampire summoning, binding him to a new lord. Pippenheim announces that he no longer serves Philip, but Lord Valor, and the vampire servants step forward to amplify the declaration. The Elector lies broken as his retainer's allegiance turns into a public execution of loyalty and betrayal. With sword at Philip's throat, Pippenheim declares the price to be paid, and a system prompt flickers into being asking whether to proceed with the Guardian kill. The warning clearly states that killing a Guardian may impact game progression and the world's balance. The system asks, proceed with Guardian kill? Valor reads the warning about raising difficulty and thinks briefly of the cost. He dismisses the risk with contempt, deciding, forget it, I wouldn't take him even if you gave him to me, refusing to spare Philip out of personal motive. Valor gives the command, Pippenheim, kill him! The vampire obeys and drives the final blow home. Red system banners scream error as the Guardian's HP falls to 0 and the world registers the death with an alarm that reverberates through the UI. System logs announce Guardian has been slain, and unlock the hidden scenario Guardian Slaying, with the note that killing all Guardians will allow ascension to Transcendent class. Another notice informs that the will of the world has been interfered with and game difficulty increases, which Valor greets with a sardonic smirk. Valor turns as the red UI overlays the sky, whispering that they did not see this coming. The ruined city feels the change as a red marker blooms over the dual site beneath the moon, the world noting a fracture where the Guardian fell. Aquila manifests beyond the world, a small figure framed by stars, violet eyes alight as she observes Valor's act. She comments with mild amusement, You actually went and broke a seal? As if testing the rules that now begin to bend. Aquila opens a door into the battlefield and peers in with teasing delight, calling Valor a naughty child and noting his smug face. She croons, Come on then, let's see what you've got, inviting him to reveal where this audacity will take him next. Aquila steps away from the small television set she used to watch the world and declares quietly that this is only the beginning, her attention fixed on the consequences that will ripple outward from Valor's rule-breaking. Side note explains Pippenheim's origin. Once Philip's loyal retainer, he was abandoned during the escape from the zombie hounds and left for dead. His hatred for Philip resonated with Valor's vampire summoning, and he was reborn as a vampire retainer to the Dark Lord. The system streams rewards at Valor. He obtains SS rank Empire Agitation, SS rank Mephistopheles' acting, SS rank Dignity of the Great Leader, S rank Lunar Shadow Sword Art, and a rank Prinzessin Chorale. Each skill appears as the world tallies the Guardian Essence transfer. Valor grins as the rewards confirm their value for slaying an elector, noting with pleasure the 3 SS ranks, 1 S rank, and 1 A rank, plus the 2 S rank class-exclusive skills as level-up rewards. You have obtained a skill. Blood Tear Absorption, rank, the UI reports. Valor inspects the drop, saying that on the surface it appears to be a normal magic zipper. When he touches it, a blue hex barrier shocks his hand and flashes a system message. You have been blocked by a barrier, forcing him to pull back and note that Margareta will need to unlock it later. Valor mutters that a barrier stands in the way and decides to get Margareta to unlock it later, the system confirming the block. He scans the ruins, alert and curious, wondering what else the knight has hidden. The system explains that Valor has obtained the essence of the Guardian, and that collecting 5 will allow ascension to a transcendent being, but warns that each Guardian killed weakens the world's protective seal. Valor processes the stakes, weighing power against the damage to the world. Valor reflects that hunting Guardians requires caution, picturing 2 possible paths, becoming a transcendent and ending up alone, or keeping bonds and sharing power while maintaining allies. He lets the choice hang in the night as the UI hums around him. Pippenheim rushes back breathless and reports, "My lord, I've found it." Valor turns to meet him, every muscle attentive, as the retainer brings word of the planted evidence and the staged deception he executed. Pippenheim presents the gleaming roll of paper recovered from Philip's men and reports the success of the search. Valor cheers that this must be the main reward, and then casually inquires if the side task was completed, the retainer answering with a formal, "Yes, my lord." Pippenheim bows with composed formality and confirms his obedience. The vampire servants fall into formation behind him, a dark, obedient cadre that completes Valor's staged tableau, as the electorate's narrative begins to be rewritten. Pippenheim reports that they dressed one of Philip's underlings in the clothes of the Pessimist faction, and disguised him to appear as a demon, completing the planted evidence. Valor applauds the deception and pronounces the ruse a success. A trembling knight begs for his life and promises anything to be spared, while Valor studies him and the vampire servants identify the captive as one of Philip's underlings who had been hiding. The net of the setup tightens around the man. The survivor pleads, "I'll do anything, just spare me," voice quivering. Valor smiles thinly, as crimson light touches his eye, and addresses the gathered faction with a caustic, "My dear Pessimist," as he prepares to use the captive for a larger plan. Valor's voice carries in the distance, taunting the morning with the gift he delivered. Far away, a column of royal cavalry rides toward the ruined city led by Lawrence, the royal guard captain under Roland, arriving to assess the aftermath. Lawrence surveys the damage with a practiced eye, then barks orders. All units, halt. Troops pull up and spread out into a cautious perimeter as the captain begins a disciplined assessment of the scene and the fallen. A lieutenant reports that the site bears the marks of a battle with Pessimist forces, and Lawrence agrees. Troopers then spot a survivor and bring him forward, and Lawrence instructs that the man be handled carefully for questioning about what happened and where Prince Philip might be. By the interrogation fire, Lawrence leans in and asks bluntly if the item was stolen. The survivor admits it, explaining they were then surrounded by Pessimist forces, and Lawrence listens without visible judgment, cataloging every detail for the report. As the survivor recounts the desperate attempts to save Philip, Lawrence slams his cup and asks point blank if the man hid while comrades died, forcing a terrified confession. The answer is a shaken yes, and the captain's expression tightens with consequence. Lawrence drives his sword into the ground beside the survivor and looks briefly to the sky, muttering that if only he had been faster. The gesture is both a private regret and a public signal, the captive flinching at the controlled fury of the moment. Suddenly, Lawrence embraces the trembling man and proclaims him a model knight who risked his life for his commander, reframing the narrative into honor. He then rallies the troops, commanding everyone to search for Prince Philip throughout the night, turning trauma into a call to action. The soldiers cheer at Lawrence's words, the captive bewildered as the moment becomes propaganda. The captain urges that though the battle was lost, knighthood endures, and instructs every unit to follow the example and hunt for the missing prince until dawn. Morning breaks over the capital as the camera pulls back to the dome of Roserant Rose Palace, where the knight's reports will soon arrive. Often the city voices answer orders with a tired, "Yes, sir," while a weary voice mutters that enough has been done, and the scene shifts toward the court and its coming consequences. Lawrence kneels before Roland and reports that the Pessimist forces were pursued after the battle, noting they found traces of Prince Philip during the chase. The captain sounds shaken and breathless as he explains Philip escaped, and his exact whereabouts remain unknown. Roland listens in the greenhouse light, taking in the failure and the missing trail as the next problem to solve. Philip has already escaped and his exact whereabouts are unknown, Lawrence confirms under his breath. Roland responds that she understands and immediately shifts focus to the missing artifact, asking whether Prince Philip had been carrying that item. She suspects the prince held the object and redirects the operation toward its recovery. Lawrence blurts that the Pessimist bastard seized the item during the chaos, stumbling over the admission. Roland finds the name Pessimist tiresome and sets priorities, declaring the artifact more important than immediate blame. She accepts the apology but insists the recovery of that item must come first, turning the conversation into a single, ruthless objective. Roland states that reclaiming the Golden Imperial Edict is the only way to restore Prince Philip to his elector seat and potentially secure the succession. Lawrence tries to protest Philip's fate, but Roland cuts off the doubt by asserting the prince is not someone who would die so easily. Her reasoning makes securing the edict the immediate command, with Philip assumed recoverable if the document is retrieved. Roland orders Lawrence to ride to Pezimut and deliver a message demanding that they hand over that item. She frames the demand as a diplomatic threat and promises consequences if Pezimut refuses, making the message both conciliatory and menacing. The Demon King seals the command with a smile that lets Lawrence know refusal will not be tolerated. The story cuts to the Pezimut forward base, as daylight reveals watchtowers and tents where commanders gather. The camp looks functional and tense after the skirmish, and the arrival of news will quickly unsettle the commanders gathered within. The location anchors the next turn in the conflict between demon lords. Pezimut explodes in disbelief when informed that High Abbess Margareta has been resurrected, calling the report impossible. His adjutant confirms the resurrection in a shaking voice, forcing the commander to face the return of a woman everyone considered neutralized. The camp moves from shock to fear as the implications sink in. A vision of Margareta's cold aura fills the room as Pezimut insists his trap had been perfect yet failed. Subordinates wonder aloud whether she is still only human, but the commander refuses to accept anything that minimizes the danger. The memory of her arrival and the trap's failure settles like a warning over Pezimut's officers. Pezimut recounts how Margareta stormed into Demon King Off's domain alone, slaughtered his subordinates, and personally severed the enemy's head. The imagery of that massacre makes the officers flinch, and Pezimut demands to know what triggered such brutal single-handed annihilation. The story of Off's fall becomes a grim legend that explains their current terror. Pezimut explains that the massacre began over a trivial insult when one of Off's men stepped on Margareta's snack, and from that moment the Demon Kings began calling her Margareta, the storm and annihilation. Her epithet captures both the cruelty of the act and a warning about provoking her, and the commanders realize how small provocations can trigger catastrophic violence. A messenger bursts into the hall with a letter addressed from Roland and announces the arrival of the Demon King's correspondence. Pezimut snaps for details, but the courier admits uncertainty and trembles as the room waits for Roland's demand. The sealed message promises new pressures on Pezimut's already brittle control. Pezimut opens Roland's letter with hands that shake and reads words that make him mutter about the danger Margareta poses. The commander cannot help but picture what a tantrum from Roland might entail, and the letter's contents push old fears to the surface. He realizes the situation may be worse than reports suggested. Pezimut explodes at the accusation that he holds the missing artifact, demanding why Roland would think he has it, while lashing out in frustration. Officers scramble to steady the situation as the commander alternates between denial and alarm. The possibility that Roland believes Pezimut responsible deepens the crisis and threatens open conflict. A subordinate blurts that Roland is demanding the return of that thing, leaving everyone stunned and searching for answers. Confusion multiplies as no one can account for why Roland would name Pezimut as custodian. The base begins to suspect an unseen hand moving pieces across the board. A junior strategist points out that Pezimut never even reached Hexax while pursuing Philip, so Roland's assumption that Pezimut has the item is baffling. The strategist catalogues the odd coincidences, Margareta's sudden resurrection and the item's disappearance, and concludes the outcomes are clear, but the cause remains vague. The concern grows that someone else may be orchestrating events behind the scenes. The strategist wonders aloud whether a mastermind is pulling strings behind the chaos, and the thought settles like a cold question across the table. The scene cuts to Valor on the road, quietly exhaling as if answering the suspicion with a presence that remains just out of sight. The foreshadowing links Valor to the wider conspiracy without revealing his role. Valor sneezes loudly while riding and Pippenheim asks if he is ill, a small comic beat that lightens the tension. Valor dismisses the concern by saying his nose only felt ticklish, keeping his movements casual, while the true meaning of his journey remains hidden. The moment undercuts the menace with a human pause before the plot moves on. On the road, Pippenheim asks what Valor plans to do with Philip's corpse, and Valor answers that it will be used later as an undead servant, treating the fallen elector as a tool. The retainer accepts that grim fate as fitting, while Valor reveals the sealed Golden Imperial Edict as the most important prize. The edict becomes the strategic prize that matters more than bodies. Valor unrolls the Golden Imperial Edict and confirms it is a document stamped with the Empire's golden seal that proves an elector's authority. The revelation that he holds both Philip's corpse and the edict makes him relish the leverage he now possesses. With the edict in hand, Valor understands he can shape the succession and bend political outcomes to his plan. Valor repeats Pippenheim's name to draw his retainer's focus, and the man responds obediently, unaware of Valor's private satisfaction. The leader begins to chuckle quietly as he rides with the edict, the sound a small signal that the plan is moving into execution. The mood is light on the surface, while the stakes beneath remain deadly. Valor proclaims that the world is now his as he parades the victory with Pippenheim at his side, and a mocking stamp declares Elector Steel Philip defeated. The narration explains that the Golden Imperial Edict is a 31-page document carrying the Empire's golden seal and the Elector's authority to appoint the next emperor. The combination of corpse and edict turns Valor's victory into a direct play for power. A merchant guild caravan moves through the night with armed escorts and covered wagons, carrying goods under an uneasy economic blockade. The caravan's tired drivers joke about profits, but the blockade has made every shipment risky and every wagon a potential target. The scene establishes the caravan returning to town under increased threat from opportunistic knights. Guild merchants celebrate that the blockade has driven up prices and joke about drinking until they drop when convoy returns. The mood collapses when a hooded attacker lunges from the trees and slashes at the wagon defenders, turning drunken optimism into immediate violence. The ambush arrives without warning, and forces the merchants and guards to fight for their lives. Hooded raiders bearing a blackbird crest charge into the convoy, and the leader orders a ruthless looting, shouting for everyone to take everything and clean the wagons out. The attackers move with brutal efficiency, and the escorts try to form a defense, but the rain and darkness favor the raiders. The convoy becomes a chaotic battlefield, as merchants and guards scramble to protect people and cargo. Convoy guards scramble as the alarm spreads, yelling for everyone to grab weapons as the hooded knights sweep through the wagons. Swords clash in the dark, and the escort tries to hold lines while men fall and wagons are overturned. The ambushers show discipline and brutality, and the caravan's defense begins to fray under the coordinated onslaught. One raider taunts the merchants, suggesting they traded with Rolin, while the convoy captain shouts back that the attackers do not understand where seized money is supposed to be directed. The exchange reveals a political motive behind the raid and highlights the confusion about how taxes and seizures have reshaped local loyalties. The attack reads less like mere banditry and more like a provocation tied to noble hostilities. The hooded commander cleaves down the defender and sneers that it does not matter to those who will take the spoils. Guards counterattack but are quickly overpowered by the raiders' skill and ferocity. The attackers press the advantage, and the convoy's hope of organized resistance dwindles with each fallen escort. The convoy captain takes a mortal blow and collapses as more raiders sweep through to secure cargo and disable resistance. Men cough blood in the mud while sacks are ripped open and crates tumbled, and the raiders move with practiced cruelty. The convoy's silence is broken by the sounds of looting and the groans of the wounded. One raider plants a sword beside a fallen guard and taunts survivors to run to Valpurgis or to the Elector of Bayern for help, daring them to do so. The comment references high noble involvement and shows the attackers want their action read as part of a larger power play. The threat ties the ambush directly to noble feuds rather than simple theft. Back at the Valpurga convent, Dame Valpurgis tends to Valor's wounds with a steady hand and gentle instructions to stay still. Valor winces and admits the treatment hurts, and she tells him to endure it with the firm kindness of someone who both cares and carries authority. The quiet scene restores a human center after violence and political maneuvering. High Abbess Margareta bursts in like a storm and announces Valor's return in a tone of delighted shock. Both Valpurgis and Valor freeze as Margareta bounds around the room, inspecting them with an awkward, playful intensity that unsettles the careful quiet. The encounter relaxes into uneasy warmth as the trio regroup after the day's horrors. Margareta announces the scandal that Valpurgis removed her helmet, treating the act like a major, startling revelation inside convent walls. Her loud reaction sends a pitcher flying and leaves Valpurgis blushing at the attention. The absurdity of the fuss lightens the mood and reveals how rare it is for Valpurgis to show herself unmasked. Margareta jokes that Valpurgis gave her an old lady a heart attack with the helmet revelation, and Valpurgis apologizes with genuine embarrassment. The exchange settles the room into affectionate teasing that slowly returns them to normal. The gentle dynamic reinforces their bond after the earlier violence and political revelations. Margareta reflects that wanting to hide one's true self is a common human feeling, and then presses Valor to take good care of Valpurgis. She warns him with a softer threat that if he ever makes Valpurgis shed even a single tear, there will be consequences. The protective charge frames their relationship in emotional as well as practical terms. Margareta shifts tone and demands confirmation that Philip is truly dead, the question moving them back into the political reality beyond the convent. Valor answers carefully that Philip's corpse is in custody, keeping the tense truth factual and contained. The conversation sets the stage for discussing the fallout and who will benefit next. Valor clarifies that Philip's body is secured by his associates and that they will handle the immediate logistics, trying to make the situation seem controlled. Margareta replies that Philip's death may still become a problem and wonders about the consequences for regional power. The two consider whether political fallout will erupt from the elector's demise. Margareta admits with grim relish that she had wanted to be the one to finish Philip off, a confession that reveals personal hatred beyond politics. Valor thinks privately that perhaps it was better the prince died by his hand, not in a public spectacle, acknowledging the moral weight of what they have done. The moment exposes both vindication and a sober reckoning over their roles. Valor surprises Margareta with sacks of gold taken from Philip's scattered band, presenting the plunder as a gift to curry favor and tie bonds. Margareta gasps in delighted shock at the sheer amount of treasure, and the mood shifts briefly to bawdy celebration as loot circulates among allies. The return of spoils cements Valor's practical diplomacy with wealth. Valor jokes that the coins will buy Margareta every snack she could want, and she erupts into playful praise, teasing him about saintly compassion and suddenly calling him handsome. She ribbing him about deprivation at Angela's hands while Valor protests with sheepish embarrassment. The banter reveals an easy intimacy that lightens the room. Valpurgis notices bundles of papers and asks what they are, and Valor explains they are letters exchanged between Philip and Roland. The letters reveal collusion, with Roland apparently trying to position Philip as emperor, and Valpurgis absorbs the implication that demon influence reached deeply into human succession plans. The correspondence reframes the morning's events as part of a larger conspiracy. Valor outlines that the emperor's relationship with Roland has soured over tax disputes, which led to the current economic blockade against merchants tied to the demon kingdoms. Margareta confirms that the blockade explains seizures and heightened tensions, and Valpurgis asks for clarification on what a blockade entails. The letters and political moves begin to explain why caravans are now targets. Valor continues that the emperor is seizing goods from merchant guilds connected to Roland, which has driven local night houses to desperate measures. The seizures have inflamed noble houses nearby, provoking raids such as House Ritter's attack on the Ignis Merchant Guild caravan. The political pressure turns trade disputes into violent confrontations on the roads. Margareta laments that the political collapses have put Valpurgis under enormous mental strain, and the younger woman flushes at the overstatement. Valor asks if something is the matter, and Valpurgis hesitates before admitting she has a concern, signaling she needs to reveal sensitive information related to the letters or the edict. The emotional weight returns as private matters surface. Valpurgis steadies herself and tells Margareta she will explain the delicate matter privately, taking responsibility for a disclosure that could complicate everything. She prepares to unburden herself while Valor listens, the room settling as the three prepare to face the political consequences together. The quiet signals a transition to a more personal, confidential exchange. Valor reflects that the whole situation has become a tangled mess, where economic sanctions risk spiraling into open conflict with the Elector of Bayern. He imagines imperial beasts clashing as a metaphor for escalating noble wars driven by seizures and revenge. The realization that a localized blockade could spark a major clash forces them to weigh the risks of every next move. Valpurgis sneaks into Valor's room at night with a small tray of tea and snacks and asks him to forget everything he learned that day, hoping to shield him from dangerous knowledge. She frames the request as a way to protect him from consequences should the letters or the edict become public. Valor hears the plea and understands the moral burden she carries. Valpurgis explains that the situation originally did not involve Valor, but his presence and loyalty have changed her calculus. Valor replies that he cannot turn away when something affects her, and offers his help despite the danger. She answers with a quiet thank you, the exchange strengthening their bond and commitment. Valpurgis admits the matter has outgrown her control, and confesses that accepting Valor's assistance would make her feel guilty, as if she had drawn him into danger. Valor listens with visible conflict but does not withdraw his offer, recognizing both her burden and the scale of what must be faced. The two-way personal loyalty against political peril. Valpurgis reflects that she is reliable yet still inexperienced and soft-hearted, a contrast illustrated by images of her idealized knightly self and private devotion. Valor names her, and she acknowledges his assessment, and he concludes that the current crisis is far too large for a single mercenary to fix alone. The admission recognizes limits and hints at the need for broader alliances. Valpurgis insists she wants to help, and declares she wants to be the woman's strength. Valor listens without backing away, and accepts the burden this choice brings. He acknowledges that mercenaries can still be useful in their own way, and prepares himself to act for the convent and for her. Valor lightens the mood with a joke, and Valpurgis manages a nervous laugh even in a dangerous moment. He follows the levity with a firm claim of confidence, making clear he will take responsibility, and that he believes he can handle what comes next. Valpurgis asks if he is confident, and the convent cathedral answers with its vast silence. Valor switches into his black uniform and departs at speed, leaving the guest chamber to push toward whatever waits deeper in the convent. Valor moves through the convent with purpose, each step taking him closer to his objective. The corridor becomes a measured path, and his pace signals urgency rather than haste. He sprints past nuns without pausing, cutting through the quiet of the halls toward a large door. The sisters glance after him, startled, while Valor keeps his focus locked on entering the chamber beyond. Valor throws the door open and calls for Mar, expecting a convent principal, but finds Aquila lounging on a sofa with bread in hand. The meeting is unexpected, and Valor immediately recalibrates from a formal summons to a negotiation with someone who is not what he anticipated. Valor reveals Prince Elector Philip's magic zipper, a portable storage rumored to hold countless gold coins, and frames it as a tempting wager. Aquila's eyes light up at the mention of the coins, and Valor pitches the idea that opening the pouch now would immediately double the reward attached to whatever they choose to do. Valor invites her to take a taste of the offer while holding the magic zipper as proof of value. Aquila's excitement spikes, and she immediately answers that she can raise the stakes, declaring that she will apply a triples modifier to the reward if the pouch is open now. Roland is identified as humanity's guardian and the demon king of the rose who governs the Roserund. Her human-friendly policies have shifted politics, causing the number of demon kings sympathetic to humans to rise, and this change reframes the wider balance of power that Valor now navigates.